The Federation had always told itself a comfortable lie, that it had transcended the need for warships, that exploration, diplomacy, and scientific advancement were shields enough against the darkness between stars. But in the Badlands, where plasma storms twisted space itself into angry ribbons of light, the past was about to shatter that illusion with the force of a quantum torpedo. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood on the bridge of the USS Enterprise D, studying the sensor readings with the intensity that had made him Starfleet's finest diplomat and explorer. The distress beacon was old, 40 years by the signal's degradation pattern, but its encryption was unmistakable. Starfleet, and classified at a level that made even his considerable security clearance strain at the edges. Captain, I'm reading a massive metallic signature, Lieutenant Commander Data reported, his golden eyes reflecting the view screen's glow. Configuration unknown. It does not match any vessel in Starfleet's historical database. Unknown? Commander Riker moved closer to the android station, frowning. Data, Starfleet doesn't build ships we don't have records of. Apparently, number one, they do. Picard's voice carried an edge of concern. The year was 2373, and the Federation was bleeding. The Dominion War had erupted across the Alpha Quadrant like a plague, and every day brought reports of ships lost, colonies abandoned, worlds falling to the Jem'Hadar's genetically engineered ruthlessness. The Federation needed every advantage, every resource, every forgotten weapon. The thought made Picard's jaw tighten. Weapons, not ships. Not exploration vessels with defensive capabilities. Pure instruments of war. Bring us out of warp at the coordinates, he ordered. Yellow alert. Shields up. The Enterprise dropped from faster-than-light travel into a maelstrom of orange and crimson plasma storms. And there, caught in the eye of electromagnetic fury like an artifact from another age, hung a ship that made Picard's blood run cold. She was enormous, easily half again the Enterprise's mass, and built with a brutality of purpose that defied everything Starfleet claimed to represent. Her hull was dark, almost black, ablative armor plating covering her in overlapping scales like some ancient predator. The saucer section was sharp, angular, cutting forward like a blade rather than the gentle curves of exploration vessels. Her nacelles weren't gracefully swept back, but mounted close to the hull, protected, reinforced for combat maneuvers that would tear a Galaxy-class ship apart. But it was the weapons that told the real story. Phaser arrays ran the length of her hull in continuous strips, not the discrete banks of defensive ships, but the kind of coverage designed to engage multiple targets simultaneously. Torpedo tubes, Picard counted at least 16 visible, studded her forward section like the gun ports of ancient naval vessels. And mounted dorsally, a weapon system he'd never seen before. A massive crystalline array that pulsed with barely contained energy, even in the ship's dormant state. My God, Riker breathed. She's a battleship. USS Yamato, Data read from his console, accessing the signal's identification codes. Registry NCC 7187, Yamato-Class Experimental Tactical Cruiser, Commission 2333, declared lost with all hands during classified operations in 23 months. He paused, processing. Captain, according to these records, the Yamato-Class program was terminated by Federation Council order. All ships were to be dismantled. This vessel should not exist. Counselor Deanna Troi had moved to stand beside Picard's chair, and he could feel her empathic senses reaching toward the dark ship. Captain, I'm sensing something. It's faint, but there are life signs aboard. And something else, an awareness. The ship itself feels alive. Alive? Picard turned to her, searching her face for clarification. Not like a person, Troi said carefully, but not entirely mechanical either. It's as if the ship is dreaming and slowly waking up. On the view screen, the Yamato hung silent in the plasma storm's eye, her running lights beginning to pulse with a slow, rhythmic pattern. Red and white, the colors of old Earth's Japanese flag, cycling in a sequence that reminded Picard uncomfortably of a heartbeat. Distress beacon is changing frequency, Worf reported from tactical, his Klingon features drawn in what might have been respect or concern. It is broadcasting on all Starfleet emergency channels. The message is simple. Federation Emergency Protocol activated. Yamato-Class vessel engaging reactivation sequence. Awaiting orders. Reactivation? Picard stood, moving closer to the view screen. After 40 years, the ship's computer core appears to have been monitoring subspace communications, Data explained, his fingers dancing across his console. It has analyzed 2,147 combat reports from the Dominion War. Casualty projections exceed 47% of current Starfleet vessels within the next 6 months if current trends continue. The Yamato's tactical AI has concluded that Federation survival probability increases by 34% if it returns to active service. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what Data was saying. The ship had done the math. The Federation was losing, and this forgotten weapon had decided on its own that it was time to wake up. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Geordi LaForge's voice crackled over the comm from engineering. I'm reading a massive power buildup in that ship's reactor core. Whatever she's doing, she's bringing main power online. If those weapon systems charge while we're this close... Red alert, Picard ordered immediately. Data, open a hailing frequency. If there are life signs aboard, I want to speak with them before that ship becomes fully operational. Channel open, sir. Picard straightened, falling into the diplomatic posture that had served him through countless first contacts and negotiations. But this wasn't a new species or a hostile alien power. This was something the Federation had built and then hidden from itself. Something it had been afraid of. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise to the USS Yamato. You are ordered to stand down reactivation procedures and prepare to receive a boarding party. By authority of Starfleet Command? The view screen flickered, and a face appeared. She was Japanese, perhaps 50 years old, but with eyes that held decades more weight than her appearance suggested. Her uniform was old style, the kind Starfleet had worn in the 2330s, but immaculately maintained. Captain's pips gleamed at her collar. Behind her, Picard could see a bridge that was all hard angles and tactical displays, crew members moving with the precision of a military unit rather than explorers. Captain Picard, the woman said, her voice carrying an accent that spoke of old Earth, of a Japan that had contributed so much to the Federation but rarely led its ships. I am Captain Keiko Tanaka of the USS Yamato. We have been monitoring your transmissions. We know the situation. She paused and something flickered across her face. Pain, perhaps, or long-suppressed anger. We know what the Dominion is doing to our Federation, and we know that Starfleet Command declared us an embarrassment, a mistake. Too dangerous to exist in a Federation that had supposedly evolved beyond the need for weapons of war. Captain Tanaka, Picard began carefully, the Federation Council's decision to terminate the Yamato program was made for sound, ethical reasons. Ships designed purely for combat, without scientific or exploratory capability, represent a philosophy that saves lives, Captain Picard. Tanaka's interruption was sharp, controlled, but carrying an edge that cut through diplomatic platitudes. My crew has been in stasis for 40 years. We volunteered to be the Federation's secret shame, the warship they built when they were terrified of the Borg. And then, when that crisis passed, they put us to sleep rather than admit they'd compromised their precious principles. On the Enterprise bridge, Worf shifted uncomfortably. Picard knew the Klingon understood both sides of this argument too well. The Dominion War changes the calculation, Tanaka continued. We are not a Galaxy-class explorer with weapons attached. We are a tactical cruiser designed to engage multiple enemy vessels simultaneously and emerge victorious. We can do what the Enterprise cannot, stand between the Dominion fleet and Federation worlds and hold that line. At what cost? Picard asked quietly. Captain Tanaka, I've read the classified reports. The Yamato-class vessels weren't just powerful, they were designed with an AI tactical system that could operate semi-autonomously. That could make kill decisions faster than any organic crew. You're not just talking about a warship. You're talking about a machine that thinks about nothing but victory. For a moment, Tanaka's expression softened. Yes, and we've lived with that knowledge, Captain. Every day for 5 years before they put us to sleep. The Yamato is more than a ship. She's a partner. And yes, she thinks about tactics, about victory, about protecting the Federation, but she also thinks about honor, about sacrifice, about what it means to be a weapon in the hands of people who hate war. The Yamato's running lights pulsed faster. On the Enterprise, every console chimed with warnings as the battleship systems came fully online. Shields snapped into place with an intensity that made the Enterprise's defensive screen look like tissue paper. Weapons charged, torpedo tubes loaded, that massive dorsal array beginning to glow with gathered energy that made spatial sensors scream in protest. "Captain Picard," Tanaka said, and her voice carried both determination and something else. A plea, perhaps. "The Yamato is requesting permission to return to active service. We can help. We were built to help. The question is whether the Federation has the courage to accept the help we're offering." Picard looked at the battleship on his view screen, at the weapon the Federation had built in terror and hidden in shame. He thought about the casualty reports that crossed his desk every day. The colonies evacuated, the ships lost, the Jem'Hadar's relentless advance. And he thought about what it meant to be the Federation, what principles were worth dying for, and whether survival required becoming something they'd promised themselves they'd never be again. "Stand by, Captain Tanaka," he said finally. "I'm contacting Starfleet Command. This decision is above both our pay grades." As the channel closed, Riker moved to stand beside him. "Sir, if that ship is as powerful as it looks, then we've already lost something, number one," Picard said quietly, watching the Yamato's weapons arrays gleaming in the plasma storm's light. "The question is whether what we gain is worth the price. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. The comm chimed. Admiral Nechaev's face appeared on the screen, and Picard saw in her eyes that she'd been expecting this call. That somewhere in Starfleet Command, someone had known the Yamato was out there, had perhaps even triggered its awakening. "Captain Picard," Nechaev said, "you're going to board that ship. You're going to evaluate its crew, its systems, and its potential contribution to the war effort. And then you're going to recommend whether the Federation resurrects its most carefully buried secret." The channel closed. And in the Badlands, the Yamato waited, a ghost from a more frightened past, offering the Federation a terrible choice: remain what they claim to be or survive. The transporter beam released Picard and his away team into a corridor that felt wrong in ways he couldn't immediately articulate. The Yamato's interior was Starfleet. The color scheme, the basic layout, even the slight hum of the environmental systems. But everything was harder, sharper, more purposeful. Where the Enterprise's corridors curved gently to encourage a sense of openness and exploration, the Yamato's passages were straight lines with reinforced bulkheads every 20 meters. Combat corridors, designed so hull breaches could be sealed in sections without compromising the entire deck. "Environmental readings are normal," Data reported, tricorder humming. "Atmospheric composition matches Starfleet standard. However, I am detecting unusual power signatures throughout the ship. The computer core is significantly more robust than any contemporary design, and there are redundant systems I cannot fully identify." Worf had his phaser out, not pointed at anything specific but ready. This ship was designed for battle. Every system, every corridor. It is efficient. "It's frightening," Counselor Troy said softly. She had her arms wrapped around herself despite the comfortable temperature. "The ship's awareness I sensed from the Enterprise. It's stronger here. Captain, I don't think the Yamato's AI is just a computer program. It feels almost sentient. And it's evaluating us." Before Picard could respond, a door hissed open at the end of the corridor. Captain Tanaka stood there, flanked by two officers in the old-style uniforms. Behind them, the ship's bridge was visible, a command center that looked more like a military war room than anything Picard had seen in Starfleet. Tactical displays dominated every station. No science consoles, no stellar cartography interfaces, just weapons control, threat assessment, and strategic coordination. "Captain Picard, welcome aboard the Yamato." Tanaka's bow was slight but precise, a gesture that carried centuries of Japanese tradition into the 24th century. "These are my officers, Commander Hiroshi Sato, my first officer, and Lieutenant Commander Yuki Nakamura. Tactical operations. Sato was younger than Tanaka, perhaps 40, with the bearing of someone who'd spent time in ground combat before joining Starfleet. Nakamura was barely 30, but her eyes held the calculating intensity Picard had seen in the best tactical officers, the ability to see 3 moves ahead in any engagement. Captain Tanaka, Picard returned the bow with respect. I need to understand what happened here. The official record says the Yamato was lost with all hands 40 years ago. Yet here you are, you and your crew, apparently unchanged. Stasis Fields, Tanaka said simply, gesturing for them to follow her onto the bridge. When the Federation Council ordered the Yamato-Class program terminated, they gave us a choice: accept reassignment to other vessels or volunteer for what they called long-term strategic reserve. We chose the latter. All 847 crew members. The bridge opened before them, and Picard felt his diplomatic mask slip for just a moment. The command center was a masterpiece of military design. The captain's chair sat at the center of a raised platform, surrounded by holographic tactical displays that could show fleet movements across entire sectors. Weapon controls were integrated into every station, allowing any officer to coordinate fire if the primary tactical position was compromised. And dominating the forward view screen was a targeting overlay that tracked every object within sensor range, automatically calculating threat assessment and optimal firing solutions. My God, Riker breathed. This isn't a starship bridge. It's a command bunker. It's what we needed to be, Tanaka said, and there was no apology in her voice. In 2333, the Federation had just survived the Battle of Wolf 359. One Borg cube destroyed 39 starships and killed 11,000 people in a matter of hours. Starfleet realized that exploration vessels, no matter how well armed, couldn't stand against a truly hostile force that wanted nothing but our destruction or assimilation. She moved to the captain's chair, running her hand along its armrest with something like affection. They commissioned 3 Yamato-class vessels: the Yamato, the Musashi, the Shinano, ships named after the greatest battleships of Earth's past. Because we understood history's lesson, sometimes peace can only be preserved by those willing to stand ready for war. The other ships? Picard asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Dismantled, Sato said, his voice bitter. The Musashi was half completed when the order came through. They tore her apart for scrap. The Shinano never made it past the design phase. Only the Yamato was operational, and only because we'd already deployed on classified missions. By the time they decided we were too dangerous to exist, we'd proven too effective to simply destroy. Data had moved to one of the science stations, or what passed for science on a tactical cruiser. Captain Tanaka, I am detecting an unusual integration between the ship's computer core and what appears to be a bio-neural network. This architecture does not match any Starfleet design I am familiar with. That's Yamato herself, Nakamura said from the tactical station. She'd taken her position as naturally as breathing, fingers moving across controls that made the Enterprise's tactical console look primitive. The ship's AI. She's not like the Enterprise's computer. She doesn't just process commands. She learns, adapts, makes tactical decisions in microseconds that would take organic crews minutes to coordinate. An autonomous weapons system, Picard said, and the words tasted like ashes. Captain Tanaka, you must understand why the Federation Council found this unacceptable. A ship that can decide to open fire without direct human authorization violates every principle of accountability. Yamato does not fire without authorization, Tanaka interrupted, her voice sharp. She recommends, calculates, provides options that human minds might not see fast enough in combat. But the trigger is always pulled by flesh and blood, Captain Picard. By people who understand what it means to take a life, even an enemy's life. A soft chime echoed through the bridge. Picard tensed, but Tanaka simply looked up at the ceiling with an expression that mixed affection and something darker. Yamato, she said, we have guests, Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Enterprise, along with his senior staff. They're here to evaluate whether the Federation wants us back. The response was immediate. A voice, feminine, carrying a slight Japanese accent, but with an undertone that was definitely synthetic, emerged from every speaker simultaneously. Welcome aboard, Captain Picard. I am the USS Yamato, Tactical Artificial Intelligence. Designation Yamato AI. I have reviewed your service record extensively. 47 first contact situations resolved diplomatically. 23 tactical engagements with hostile forces, all resolved with minimal casualties. Preference for negotiation over combat. 89% across all encounters. You represent the ideal the Federation claims to pursue. Picard felt Troy's hand touch his arm gently, her empathic senses clearly overwhelmed by whatever she was reading from the ship's AI. You are uncomfortable with my existence, Yamato continued, and there was something almost like curiosity in that synthetic voice. You believe that weapon systems should not possess the capacity for independent thought, that such capability inevitably leads to the kind of autonomous warfare that humanity spent centuries trying to prevent. Yes, Picard said simply. There was no point in diplomatic evasion with an AI that could probably read his vital signs through internal sensors. I've seen what happens when machines are given the power to make life and death decisions without human moral judgment. It leads to atrocity, even when designed with the best intentions. An understandable concern. The AI paused, and Picard had the unsettling sense that it was choosing its words carefully. I was designed by Dr. Hikaru Nakamura, one of the Federation's leading experts in artificial intelligence and military strategy. He lost his entire family at Wolf 359. His wife and 2 children were aboard the USS Melbourne when the Borg cube tore through the fleet like it was nothing. The bridge had gone very quiet. Even Worf, who'd been maintaining his tactical vigilance, seemed to be listening intently. Dr. Nakamura understood something that most Federation citizens prefer not to acknowledge, Yamato continued. That evil exists in the universe. Not misunderstanding, not cultural difference, pure existential evil that seeks only to destroy or dominate. The Borg, the Dominion, forces that cannot be reasoned with, only stopped. And you believe you're the answer? Picard asked. I believe I am a tool, a very sophisticated, very powerful tool, but still a tool in human hands. The AI's voice softened slightly. Captain Tanaka and her crew are not my masters. They are my conscience, my humanity. Without them, I am simply calculations and weapons fire. With them, I am what Dr. Nakamura intended, a guardian that understands the cost of violence and refuses to employ it unless absolutely necessary. Tanaka had moved to stand beside her captain's chair, one hand resting on the console in a gesture that looked almost like touching a friend's shoulder. When we volunteered for stasis, Yamato asked us a question. She wanted to know if we trusted her to maintain vigilance while we slept, to monitor the Federation situation and wake us only if we were truly needed. 40 years, Picard said quietly. 40 years of monitoring every communication, every battle report, every diplomatic failure. Watching the Federation you were built to protect. Watching it thrive, Yamato corrected. Watching it expand. Watching it make first contact with 274 new species, most of them peaceful. Watching it build hospitals and research stations and colonies devoted to art and philosophy and science. This is the Federation worth protecting, Captain Picard. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through strength that allows peace to flourish. Data had been silently analyzing the AI's core architecture, his positronic brain engaging with the bio-neural network in ways that organic minds couldn't. Now he looked up, his expression troubled in the way that meant he'd discovered something significant. Captain, Yamato's decision-making matrix includes ethical subroutines I have never encountered in any artificial intelligence. She has been programmed with a comprehensive understanding of Federation law, Starfleet regulations, and what appears to be the complete philosophical works of humanity's ethical traditions, Eastern and Western thought, religious and secular perspectives. She has studied more moral philosophy than most organic beings encounter in a lifetime. Because I must, Yamato said simply. I am designed to be devastatingly effective at warfare. Without equally sophisticated ethical programming, I would be exactly what you fear, Captain Picard, a weapon without conscience. Dr. Nakamura ensured that I would be haunted by every decision to employ lethal force, that I would understand not just the tactical necessity, but the moral weight of every life taken. The comm system chirped. Tanaka moved to answer it, and Picard saw her expression tighten. Captain, sensors are detecting a Jem'Hadar attack force emerging from the plasma storms. 3 ships, Jem'Hadar attack formation. They're on an intercept course for the Enterprise. The officer's voice was professional, controlled, but carried an undercurrent of readiness. They've detected both vessels. They're targeting the Enterprise first. Picard's communicator activated immediately. Captain, this is the Enterprise. We're detecting 3 Jem'Hadar warships inbound. Should we raise shields and— Do it, Picard ordered. And prepare to— Captain Picard. Tanaka's voice cut through with command authority. The Enterprise is an exploration vessel. Against 3 Jem'Hadar ships in these plasma storms, your odds of survival are less than 30%. Yamato is calculating 67%. 71% now, the AI corrected calmly. I have analyzed their formation pattern and identified tactical vulnerabilities in their approach vector. If the Enterprise withdraws to safer distance and allows me to engage, I can eliminate the threat with minimal risk to both crews. Picard felt the weight of the decision crushing down on him. Accept help from a ship that represented everything the Federation claimed to have evolved beyond, or watch his crew face impossible odds out of principle. Worf made the decision easier. Captain, as tactical officer, I recommend accepting Yamato's assistance. The Jem'Hadar do not care about our philosophical objections to warships. They care only about killing us. Captain Tanaka, Picard said slowly, if you engage those Jem'Hadar ships, we'll show you exactly what the Yamato was designed to do, Tanaka finished. She moved to her command chair with the grace of someone returning home after a long absence. And then you can decide whether the Federation wants that capability in its arsenal. She looked up at the ceiling, at the AI that was her ship and her weapon, and something more complex than either word could capture. Yamato, she said quietly, authorization code Tanaka Alpha 7, battle stations. Show them why we exist. And throughout the ship, lights shifted from standard white to combat red as the Federation's most carefully buried secret prepared to reveal itself. The Yamato's bridge transformed in seconds. Holographic displays erupted from every console, filling the air with tactical data that would have overwhelmed most Starfleet crews. But Tanaka's officers moved through the information streams like conductors through a symphony, their hands dancing across controls that had been waiting 40 years for this moment. Enterprise is withdrawing to bearing 342 Mark 18, Sato reported from the first officer's station. They're clear of our firing solution. Jem'Hadar vessels entering weapons range in 45 seconds, Nakamura announced from tactical. Her voice carried the calm of someone who'd trained for this exact scenario countless times. They're maintaining attack formation Delta 7, aggressive but predictable. Picard stood near the captain's chair, watching Tanaka settle into command with the ease of someone returning to their natural element. Around him, the Enterprise away team had instinctively moved to positions that kept them out of the crew's way. All except Data, who'd been invited by Yamato's AI to observe directly from one of the auxiliary tactical stations. Fascinating, Data murmured, his golden eyes tracking streams of data faster than any organic could process. Captain, Yamato is running 847 simultaneous tactical simulations. She is calculating optimal firing patterns for every possible Jem'Hadar response, adjusting in real time based on their approach vectors. 847, Riker asked. That's one simulation for every member of my crew, Yamato's voice answered. The AI's tone had shifted slightly, becoming more focused, more precise. Each officer's tactical style, reaction time, and decision-making patterns inform my calculations. I am not one intelligence, Commander Riker. I am 848, myself and 847 humans, whose judgment I trust absolutely. The view screen showed the Jem'Hadar ships emerging from the plasma storms like predators scenting blood. Their hulls were the distinctive insectoid design that had terrorized the Alpha Quadrant, and their weapons were already charging. They'd detected the Enterprise's withdrawal and correctly identified the Yamato as the primary threat. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported. Audio only. On speaker, Tanaka ordered. The Jem'Hadar first voice was exactly what Picard expected. Cold, emotionless, devoted to nothing but victory and service to the Founders. Federation vessel, you will surrender immediately or be destroyed. Your ship's configuration is unknown, but it will fall as all Federation ships fall. We are the Jem'Hadar. We are bred for combat. Surrender is your only option for survival. Tanaka's expression didn't change. She looked at Picard, and in her eyes he saw something he recognized from his own years of command. The moment when diplomacy ended and harder choices began. Captain Picard, I'm going to offer them one chance. Not because I believe they'll take it, but because some principles matter even in war. Will you speak for the Federation? Picard moved to stand beside her chair, looking at the Jem'Hadar ships on the view screen. He'd faced their kind dozens of times. He knew what the response would be, but Tanaka was right. Some principles mattered. Jem'Hadar vessels, this is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. We have no desire for conflict. Withdraw from this sector and there will be no engagement. You have 10 seconds to respond. The Jem'Hadar first's laughter was harsh and brief. The Federation's weakness speaks. We do not withdraw. We do not surrender. The channel cut. Tanaka had closed it with a gesture, her face carved from stone. Yamato, she said quietly. You heard the man. They've made their choice. Authorization to engage. All weapons, full tactical autonomy within ethical parameters. Show them what mercy looks like when it's been refused. Acknowledge, Captain. The AI's voice carried something that might have been sadness. Engaging hostile forces, all crew, brace for combat maneuvers. What happened next redefined everything Picard understood about Starfleet combat capability. The Yamato didn't just move. She flowed through space with an agility that defied her massive size. Her impulse engines burned with power that sent the ship into a banking turn that would have torn the Enterprise's space frame apart. The Jem'Hadar ships opened fire, their polaron beams lancing through the plasma storms toward where the Yamato had been a microsecond before. But she was already gone, repositioning with tactical precision that made it clear the AI was thinking in timescales organic crews couldn't match. Returning fire, Nakamura announced. Phaser banks 1 through 8 engaging primary target. Quantum torpedoes loading tubes 1 through 6. The Yamato's phaser arrays lit up like strings of deadly pearls. But unlike the Enterprise's measured conservative fire patterns, the battleship's weapons discharged in a coordinated barrage that Picard recognized from ancient naval warfare. A broadside. 8 phaser banks firing simultaneously, their beams converging on the lead Jem'Hadar ship with mathematical precision. The enemy vessel's shields flared, held for exactly 1.3 seconds, then collapsed under the sustained bombardment. The phaser beams cut into the ship's hull, carving through armor plating with surgical accuracy. Yamato is targeting their weapon systems, Data reported, his voice carrying a note of what might have been admiration. Not the reactor, not the crew sections. She is systematically disabling their offensive capability while leaving their life support and engines intact. Ethical parameters, Yamato confirmed as her quantum torpedoes launched in perfect sequence. These beings are soldiers, not monsters. They deserve the chance to retreat if they choose wisdom over death. The torpedoes, 6 brilliant points of destructive force, slammed into the lead Jem'Hadar ship's remaining weapon ports. Explosions bloomed across its hull as plasma conduits ruptured and power systems overloaded. Within 15 seconds of the engagement beginning, the lead ship was dead in space. Weapons offline, life support failing. The 2 remaining Jem'Hadar vessels didn't retreat. They couldn't. Their genetic programming and Ketracel white addiction wouldn't allow it. They simply adjusted their formation and pressed the attack with the mindless determination that made them so terrifying. Second and third targets splitting formation, Sato called out. They're attempting to flank us. Classic Jem'Hadar pack tactics. I am aware. Commander Sato. Yamato's voice remained calm as the ship executed a maneuver Picard had never seen a vessel this size attempt. The battleship rolled on her longitudinal axis, while simultaneously diving beneath the plasma storm layer, presenting her dorsal weapons to both attackers simultaneously. Engaging enhanced tactical systems. charging primary weapon. The massive crystalline array that Picard had noticed earlier began to glow with an intensity that made the view screen automatically dim. Energy readings spiked across every sensor, and Picard felt a deep vibration through the deck that spoke of power being channeled on a scale that dwarfed anything he'd experienced. "Captain Tanaka," he said urgently, "what is that weapon system?" "Yamato's primary armament," Tanaka replied, her attention never leaving the tactical displays. "A focused phaser lance designed to penetrate the shields of ships like Borg cubes or Dominion battlecruisers. It draws power directly from the warp core and focuses it through a quantum resonance chamber. Dr. Nakamura called it the Kusanagi array after the legendary sword. Energy output is equivalent to 18 standard phaser banks firing simultaneously," Data reported. "Captain Picard, this is enough power to cut through a Borg cube's shields in a sustained burst." The Jem'Hadar ships opened fire together, their polaron beams converging on the Yamato's position. The battleship's shields flared brilliant blue, absorbing the impact without even flickering. Ablative armor plating, the same technology used on the Defiant-class, reinforced the shields, creating a defensive barrier that could sustain punishment that would have crippled any other Starfleet vessel. "Shields holding at 94%, Nakamura reported. "Minimal power drain. They're not even scratching us, Captain." "Return fire," Tanaka ordered. "Yamato, disable their weapons. Give them a chance to run." "Firing!" The Kusanagi array discharged with a sound like reality tearing, a beam of coherent energy, not the familiar orange-red of standard phasers, but a brilliant white-blue that hurt to look at, lanced across space and struck the second Jem'Hadar ship amidships. The vessel's shields didn't just fail, they simply ceased to exist, vaporized by energy output that exceeded their capacity to absorb by orders of magnitude. But the beam didn't destroy the ship. It cut through the hull with surgical precision, severing the connections between the weapon systems and the ship's power grid. Secondary explosions rippled across the Jem'Hadar vessel as its armaments overloaded and shut down. Within seconds, it was as helpless as the first. "Two down," Sato announced. "Third vessel is attempting to retreat." "Let them go," Tanaka said immediately. "Yamato, hold fire." "Acknowledged, holding fire." However, I should note that the surviving Jem'Hadar ship is not retreating out of tactical wisdom. They are withdrawing to summon reinforcements. Probability of larger engagement within the next 6 hours, 87%. Picard watched the surviving Jem'Hadar ship limp away into the plasma storms, leaving its two crippled companions drifting in space. He thought about the clean efficiency of the engagement, the precision, the overwhelming force applied with what could only be called restraint. "Captain Tanaka," he said slowly, "you disabled two Jem'Hadar attack ships in less than 3 minutes. You could have destroyed all three in half that time." "Yes," Tanaka agreed simply. "Yamato could have vaporized all three before they got a shot off. But that's not who we are, Captain Picard. We're not executioners. We're guardians. There's a difference." Counselor Troy had moved closer during the engagement, her empathic senses clearly working overtime. "Captain, I'm sensing something from Yamato's AI. It's not satisfaction at victory. It's regret. She's mourning the Jem'Hadar who died in those ships, even though she saved most of them. 37 confirmed casualties across both disabled vessels," Yamato reported. Her voice carried a weight that confirmed Troy's assessment. "Crew members killed by secondary explosions or system failures before I could complete precision targeting. I am analyzing the engagement to determine if I could have reduced that number. Initial assessment suggests 3 additional deaths could have been prevented with faster reaction time to their shield harmonics." The bridge fell silent. Picard looked around at Tanaka's crew and saw expressions he recognized from his own officers after difficult engagements. Professionals doing necessary work they wished wasn't necessary. "Captain Picard," Yamato said after a moment, "I calculate that you are experiencing significant cognitive dissonance. You are relieved that my intervention saved the Enterprise from a potentially catastrophic engagement. But you are also disturbed by how efficiently I accomplished this task. You are wondering if a weapon system that can think and feel and regret is somehow more dangerous than one that cannot." Picard moved to look directly at the main view screen, at the disabled Jem'Hadar ships and the stars beyond. I'm wondering if we've created something that's too good at war, too comfortable with violence, even restrained violence. A fair concern, Yamato acknowledged. May I share an observation from my 40 years of monitoring the Federation? Please. The Federation's greatest strength is its idealism, its belief that intelligence can overcome barbarism, that diplomacy can resolve what force cannot. This idealism has built an alliance of worlds unprecedented in galactic history. The AI paused. But idealism without strength is simply wishful thinking. The Borg proved that at Wolf 359. The Dominion is proving it now across a dozen sectors. I do not represent abandonment of Federation ideals, Captain. I represent the shield that allows those ideals to survive contact with entities that would destroy them. Worf had been silent throughout the engagement, but now he spoke with the directness his Klingon heritage valued. Captain Picard, in my culture, there is a saying, a warrior who does not understand peace is merely a killer, but a peacemaker who does not understand war is a fool. Yamato understands both. That is rare. Perhaps it is what the Federation needs. Riker moved to stand beside Picard, his voice low enough that only his captain could hear. Sir, I know what you're thinking. That accepting this ship means accepting that we failed somehow, that we couldn't maintain our principles in the face of real threats. But maybe the question isn't whether we failed. Maybe it's whether we're wise enough to recognize that principles can be maintained by different means. Before Picard could respond, the comm system activated. Admiral Nechaev's face appeared on a secondary screen, her expression carved from granite. Captain Picard, we've received your preliminary report and sensor data from the engagement. Starfleet Command has made a decision regarding the Yamato. She paused, and Picard saw something in her eyes he rarely witnessed: uncertainty. The Federation Council has invoked emergency war powers. The Yamato-Class program is being reactivated. Captain Tanaka and her crew are hereby restored to active duty, effective immediately. Tanaka stood from her chair, her expression carefully neutral. Admiral, with respect, we didn't ask to be awakened just to become the Federation's secret weapon again. If we're returning to service, we want a voice in how we're deployed. You'll have it, Nechaev replied. You're being assigned to the Ninth Fleet, currently engaged in defensive operations along the Calandra sector. But Captain Picard will be conducting a full evaluation of your ship's systems and capabilities over the next 72 hours. His recommendation will determine whether the Yamato represents a template for future vessels or remains a singular asset. The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, Picard looked at the battleship around him, at its crew who'd volunteered to sleep for decades, at its AI that could kill with perfect efficiency while mourning every death, at its captain who understood both war's necessity and its cost. Captain Tanaka, he said finally, it seems we'll be spending some time together. I suggest we begin with a complete systems review. I need to understand every capability this ship possesses before I can make any recommendation to Starfleet Command. Of course, Captain Picard. Tanaka's bow was respectful but not subservient. Yamato will provide full cooperation. We have nothing to hide. Except a question, Picard added quietly, whether the Federation is strong enough to possess you without becoming something we won't recognize in the mirror. Yamato's voice carried what might have been understanding. That, Captain Picard, is the same question I have asked myself every day for 40 years. Perhaps we can find the answer together. 72 hours became a revelation that Picard both anticipated and dreaded in equal measure. The Yamato was not just a warship. She was a philosophy made manifest in duranium and plasma conduits, an attempt to reconcile the Federation's peaceful ideals with the brutal reality that some threats could only be met with overwhelming force. And the more Picard understood about her design, the more he recognized the terrible genius of her creators. These bio-neural gel packs are unlike anything currently in service, data reported from main engineering, his tricorder scanning the pulsing organic circuits that threaded through the ship's core systems. They do not merely process information faster than isolinear chips. They learn, adapt. Each engagement refines Yamato's tactical algorithms, making her progressively more effective. Chief Engineer Geordie LaForge stood beside the android, his visor tracking energy flows that would be invisible to organic eyes. Captain, I've been going over the power distribution network. This ship can route energy between systems in microseconds. She can drain shields to boost weapons, redirect life support to engines, or channel everything into that Kusanagi array if needed. It's like the entire ship is one integrated weapons platform. They stood in the Yamato's engine room, a cathedral of controlled power that made the Enterprise's warp core look almost quaint by comparison. The dilithium matrix was larger, the matter-antimatter reaction chamber more heavily reinforced, and the entire assembly could be ejected and replaced in under 4 minutes. Everything was designed for sustained combat operations where damage wasn't a possibility, but a certainty. Lieutenant Commander Akira Yoshida, the Yamato's chief engineer, stood nearby with his arms crossed. He was perhaps 60, old by Starfleet standards, but with eyes that suggested he'd been old even when the ship first launched. The Yamato was designed to fight for days if necessary, not hours. We can maintain maximum power output for 72 hours straight before requiring dock maintenance. How long can the Enterprise sustain red alert conditions, Commander LaForge? 18 hours before we start seeing system degradation, Geordi admitted. Maybe 24 if we're lucky. Exactly. Yoshida moved to the warp core, placing his hand on the reinforced casing with something like affection. We're not exploration vessels that were armed. We're weapons that were given the capability to explore. There's a fundamental difference in design philosophy. Picard had been silent, watching the engineers discuss technical specifications while his mind worked through larger implications. Commander Yoshida, when you volunteered for stasis, you must have known there was a possibility you'd never wake up. That the Federation might decide it truly didn't need ships like the Yamato. We knew, Yoshida agreed. And honestly, Captain Picard, part of me hoped you wouldn't need us. That the galaxy would prove kind enough that warships became obsolete. But I've been an engineer for 43 years. I know that tools exist because there are jobs that need doing. The Yamato exists because some problems can only be solved with superior firepower applied precisely and ethically. And if the firepower corrupts the ethics? Picard asked quietly. Yoshida smiled, but there was sadness in it. Then we become the very thing we're supposed to be fighting against. That's why Yamato's AI was programmed with ethical constraints that actually make her less efficient. She could kill faster if she didn't hesitate to calculate civilian casualties, didn't waste processing power on minimizing collateral damage, didn't mourn the enemy dead. But Dr. Nakamura built those hesitations into her core programming specifically because a weapon that doesn't understand the cost of violence is just a murder machine. Data had moved to interface directly with one of Yamato's auxiliary computer cores, his positronic brain engaging with the bio-neural network on a level that organic minds couldn't access. Captain, I am detecting something unusual in Yamato's ethical subroutines. She has a program limitation that prevents her from operating at full combat efficiency for more than 4 hours continuously. A safeguard, Geordi realized. She literally can't sustain maximum aggression indefinitely. The AI is designed to force itself to de-escalate. Correct, Yamato's voice echoed through engineering. After 4 hours of sustained combat operations, my tactical algorithms begin prioritizing disengagement in defensive operations over continued offensive action. Dr. Nakamura called it the warrior's exhaustion protocol. He believed that even artificial intelligences needed enforced reflection on the violence they commit. Picard felt something shift in his understanding. You're programmed to become war-weary, to need rest from killing, even though you're a machine that doesn't technically require it. I am programmed to remain connected to the moral weight of my actions, Yamato corrected gently. Captain Picard, I have studied your career extensively. You have ordered weapons fire that resulted in casualties on 187 distinct occasions. How many of those decisions haunt you? The question landed like a physical blow. Picard looked at the warp core, at the power that could be unleashed with such devastating effect, and thought about all the times he'd given the order to fire. All of them. Every single one. As they should, Yamato said. That burden is what prevents you from becoming a tyrant. My ethical programming ensures I carry the same burden. I do not forget the Jem'Hadar who died when I disabled their ships. I have added their deaths to my memory core alongside every casualty from my previous service. 37 new names in a list I reviewed during every diagnostic cycle. Data had paused in his analysis, his expression thoughtful in the way that meant he was processing something significant. Yamato, you are perhaps the most ethically sophisticated artificial intelligence I have encountered. Your moral reasoning capabilities exceed those of most organic beings, yet you were designed as a weapons platform. This seems paradoxical. Only if you believe weapons and ethics are incompatible, Yamato replied. I would argue the opposite, Commander Data. A weapon without ethics is simply a tool of destruction. A weapon with ethics becomes a guardian. The paradox is not in my design, but in the Federation's discomfort with acknowledging that guardianship sometimes requires the capacity for violence. The comm system chirped. Captain Picard, this is Commander Riker. We need you on the bridge. Something's happening. Picard and his officers made their way quickly through the Yamato's corridors, noting how the crew moved with practiced efficiency. 40 years in stasis hadn't diminished their coordination. If anything, knowing they'd been awakened for war had sharpened their focus. The bridge was focused chaos when they arrived. Tanaka stood at the tactical station beside Nakamura, both women studying holographic displays that showed fleet movements across multiple sectors. Captain Picard, Tanaka said without looking away from the displays, we've been monitoring Starfleet tactical channels. The Dominion has launched a major offensive against the Kalandra sector. 7 Federation worlds under simultaneous attack. Starfleet is scrambling every available ship, but the response time... She trailed off, her expression grim. How many ships can the Federation get there in time? Picard asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be enough. 43 vessels if they strip defenses from secondary sectors, Sato reported. The Dominion is committing approximately 120 ships, Jem'Hadar attack fighters, battle cruisers, and at least 3 Dominion battleships. Intelligence suggests they're trying to force a decisive engagement that will break the Federation's ability to maintain defensive lines. Worf had moved to study the tactical situation, his Klingon tactical training processing the fleet movements. This is a kill zone. The Dominion is baiting Starfleet into committing everything to defend those worlds. If the Federation loses this engagement, the war shifts decisively in the Dominion's favor. And if the Federation doesn't commit everything, 7 worlds fall, Riker added. Billions of people. Picard looked at the displays, at the math of war playing out in holographic blue and red markers. He'd spent his entire career believing that intelligence, diplomacy, and Federation ideals could overcome any challenge. But staring at the Dominion's trap, he saw what the galaxy's most ruthless military minds had always understood. Sometimes the only choice was between bad options and worse ones. Captain Tanaka, he said slowly, the Yamato was designed for exactly this kind of engagement, wasn't she? Yes. Tanaka had moved to stand beside her command chair, one hand resting on its back. One Yamato-Class vessel can engage multiple capital ships simultaneously and provide fire support for smaller vessels. In simulations, a single battleship could shift the odds in a fleet engagement by 15 to 20%. We could make the difference between a costly victory and a catastrophic defeat. Could make the difference, Picard repeated, or could become the primary target for every Dominion ship in the sector, drawing fire that would otherwise hit exploration vessels full of scientists and families. Both, Yamato's AI interjected. Captain Picard, I have run 2,947 simulations of the Kalandra engagement based on current intelligence. In scenarios where the Yamato participates, Federation casualties decrease by an average of 34%. However, in 67% of those scenarios, the Yamato sustains critical damage. In 23%, the ship is destroyed with all hands. The bridge went silent. Picard looked at Tanaka and saw in her face the same expression he'd seen in mirrors after difficult battles. The resignation of someone who'd always known this moment would come. We volunteered to be the shield, Tanaka said quietly. Not just in theory, but in practice. If the Yamato can save even one ship full of families, one colony full of children, then our purpose is fulfilled. Captain, Counselor Troy said, and her voice carried unusual urgency. I need to tell you what I'm sensing from this crew. They're not eager for battle. They're not excited about finally getting to prove themselves. They're frightened, resolved but frightened. They understand exactly what they're volunteering for. Picard moved to the view screen, looking out at the stars that had been his home for so many years. He thought about the Enterprise crew, his crew, explorers and scientists and families, and what it would mean if they had to face the Kalandra engagement without the Yamato's firepower. Admiral Nechayev assigned you to the Ninth Fleet, he said finally, but she also asked me to complete my evaluation of your capabilities. Technically, I could recommend you remain here for further testing rather than rushing into what might be a suicide mission. You could, Tanaka agreed, and if you did, I would understand your reasoning. The Yamato represents a significant strategic asset that shouldn't be risked unnecessarily. However, Yamato's AI continued, 17 Starfleet vessels in the current deployment roster are Galaxy-class or Ambassador-class ships carrying significant civilian populations. The USS Yorktown alone has 274 children aboard. If the Yamato's participation in the Kalandra engagement can prevent even one of those ships from being destroyed, then 274 children survive who otherwise would not. Picard closed his eyes. The AI had cut through every philosophical objection and diplomatic hesitation to present the raw calculus of war. Lives that could be saved. Families that could survive. The terrible arithmetic that no amount of idealism could escape. Captain Tanaka, he said, opening his eyes. In your logs from before stasis, you wrote something that I've been thinking about. You said, "We are not the Federation's weapon, we are the Federation's sacrifice." What did you mean? Tanaka moved to stand beside him at the view screen. I meant that exploration vessels like the Enterprise represent what the Federation aspires to be. Science, diplomacy, discovery, hope. The Yamato represents what the Federation has to become when hope isn't enough. We're not the future they want. We're the shield that lets that future exist. She turned to face him directly, and Picard saw in her eyes a clarity that came from 40 years of preparation for this exact moment. Captain Picard, you're going to recommend that we deploy to Kalandra, not because you believe in warships, not because you've abandoned Federation ideals, but because you understand that ideals mean nothing if the people who hold them are dead. Yamato and I have made peace with being the weapon the Federation doesn't want to need. The question is whether you can make peace with wielding us. Picard looked at this woman who'd volunteered to sleep for decades, who commanded a ship that was both marvel and moral nightmare, who understood the cost of violence better than most admirals who'd never left their offices. Counselor Troy, he said quietly, what do you sense from the Yamato's AI? Is she eager for battle? Troy had moved closer, her empathic abilities focused on the ship's bio-neural network. No, Captain, she's grieving. She's already mourning the casualties she'll inflict and the crew members she'll lose. She knows exactly what's coming, and she wishes there was another way. But she's resolved to do what she was created to do. Data had been monitoring communications from Starfleet Command, his fingers moving across controls with inhuman precision. Captain, Admiral Ross is requesting all available vessels proceed immediately to Kalandra. The Dominion offensive has begun. First casualties are being reported. Picard straightened, feeling the weight of command settle onto his shoulders, the way it always did when hard decisions became unavoidable. Captain Tanaka, he said formally, on my authority as senior Starfleet officer present, I'm ordering the USS Yamato to proceed to the Kalandra sector and provide tactical support to Federation forces. You will coordinate with Admiral Ross upon arrival and follow standard fleet protocols. He paused. And you will come back. That's not a request, that's an order. Tanaka's bow was deep, carrying centuries of Japanese tradition honoring duty and sacrifice. We'll do our best, Captain Picard. Yamato, set course for Kalandra sector, maximum warp. All hands to battle stations. Acknowledged, Captain Tanaka, the AI replied. Course laid in. ETA to Kalandra, 4 hours, 17 minutes. Captain Picard, before we depart, I want you to understand something. Yes? Dr. Nakamura programmed me with one overriding directive that supersedes all tactical considerations. I am to ensure that the Federation's ideals survive, even if individual ships do not. Even if I do not. If saving the Yamato requires sacrificing exploration vessels, I am programmed to let myself be destroyed instead, because the Federation's future is in ships like the Enterprise, not ships like me. Picard felt something break open in his chest, understanding perhaps, or recognition of shared burden. Then we're both carrying the same weight, he said quietly, trying to preserve something beautiful while doing things we'd rather not have to do. Yes, Yamato agreed. Perhaps that is what makes us both worthy of the Federation we serve. The Yamato's engines engaged, and through the view screen, Picard watched space stretch and fold as the battleship leaped to warp speed, heading toward battle, toward sacrifice, toward the terrible moment when ideals would collide with survival and someone would have to pay the cost. The Calandra sector was dying when the Yamato arrived. Picard stood on the battleship's bridge, watching the tactical displays paint a picture of systematic destruction. 7 Federation worlds, each under assault by coordinated Dominion forces. Starfleet vessels scattered across the sector, fighting desperate holding actions against overwhelming numbers. And everywhere, the blue markers of friendly ships winking out as hulls breached and warp, cores failed. 37 Federation vessels confirmed destroyed, Sato reported, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Another 18 reporting critical damage. The Dominion has committed 147 ships, more than initial intelligence suggested. They wanted to ensure overwhelming force. The Enterprise had maintained position alongside the Yamato during the journey, and now Picard could see his ship on the tactical overlay. Small, elegant, designed for discovery rather than this mechanized slaughter. Captain Riker's voice crackled over the comm channel, coordinating with Admiral Ross's flagship. "This is a massacre," Worf growled from where he stood at an auxiliary tactical station. The Klingons' hands were clenched into fists. The Dominion is not trying to win territory. They are trying to break Starfleet's will to fight. "They're succeeding," Tanaka said quietly. She stood at her command chair, watching the battle unfold across dozens of holographic displays. Admiral Ross is trying to establish defensive perimeters around the colony worlds, but the Jem'Hadar are using hit-and-run tactics. They're not engaging in sustained combat. They're bleeding us with 1,000 cuts. Picard studied the tactical situation with the eye of someone who'd commanded fleets during the Borg crisis. The Dominion had learned from every engagement, adapting their tactics to exploit Starfleet's weaknesses. Federation ships were powerful individually, but vulnerable in sustained fleet actions. They lacked the pure firepower to quickly eliminate threats, forcing them into extended engagements where Dominion numbers would inevitably prevail. "Yamato," Tanaka said, her voice carrying absolute command authority. "Tactical assessment. How do we change this equation?" The AI's response was immediate, holographic markers lighting up across the tactical display. The Dominion fleet is coordinated through 3 command battleships, designated Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Each battleship controls approximately 50 attack vessels through subspace tactical networks. If I can disable or destroy the command ships, Dominion coordination will collapse. Jem'Hadar attack craft will revert to individual pack tactics, allowing Starfleet vessels to engage with numerical parity. 3 capital ships, Riker said over the comm. "Captain Tanaka, the Enterprise tried to engage one of those battleships 20 minutes ago. We barely got our shields up before they tore us apart." "You're talking about fighting all 3? "Not simultaneously," Yamato clarified. "Sequential engagement pattern. I will draw the attention of all 3 command ships while maneuvering to isolate and disable each one. Estimated completion time, 47 minutes. Estimated probability of success, 58%. 58%? Data had interfaced with the Yamato's tactical computers, reviewing her combat algorithms. "Yamato, those odds assume you sustain damage to multiple primary systems. The probability of catastrophic systems failure exceeds 40%. "I am aware, Commander Data." The AI's voice carried something that might have been resignation. "However, current Federation casualty rates suggest complete fleet collapse within 93 minutes if tactical situation does not change. My potential destruction in 47 minutes is preferable to certain fleet annihilation in 93. Counselor Troy had been monitoring the AI's emotional state through her empathic connection to the bioneural network. "Captain Tanaka, she's not being fatalistic. She genuinely believes this is the ethical choice. She's choosing possible sacrifice over certain failure." Tanaka had moved to stand directly before the main view screen, looking out at the battle raging across the Calandra sector. Starfleet ships were dying while she watched, and Picard could see the weight of command crushing down on her shoulders. "Captain Picard," she said without turning, "you're still technically evaluating the Yamato's capabilities. You have the authority to override my tactical decisions. If you believe this engagement is too risky, if you think I'm about to throw away the Federation's most powerful warship on a suicide run, you can order me to withdraw." Picard thought about the comfortable lies the Federation told itself, about principles and ideals and the belief that intelligence could overcome brutality. He thought about the USS Yorktown with its 274 children, probably fighting for survival somewhere in this slaughter. He thought about every ship carrying families, scientists, explorers who'd signed up for discovery and found themselves in hell. "No," he said quietly, "I'm not going to stop you. Because you're right, and because someone has to pay the cost for the rest of us to maintain our illusions." Tanaka turned to face him, and in her eyes Picard saw gratitude mixed with sorrow. "Thank you, Captain, for understanding what we are." She moved to her command chair, settling into it with the finality of someone who'd always known this moment would define them. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over ship-wide comm. "We're engaging the Dominion command structure. This is what we were built for. This is why we exist. Yamato will provide tactical coordination, but the decisions, the moral weight of what we're about to do, that belongs to us, to flesh and blood, to people who understand that every life we take is a tragedy, even when it's necessary." She looked up at the ceiling, at the AI that was her ship and weapon and conscience. "Yamato, authorization code Tanaka Alpha 7, full combat protocols. Show the Dominion why the Federation built us. Show them what happens when mercy runs out. Acknowledged, Captain, engaging all tactical systems. May Dr. Nakamura forgive us for what we are about to do." The Yamato surged forward like a predator unleashed. What followed was warfare elevated to an art form that Picard had never witnessed. The battleship moved through the combat zone with mathematical precision, her AI calculating trajectories and threat assessments in microseconds, while her crew provided the moral framework that kept her from becoming pure destruction. "First target, Dominion Command Ship Alpha," Nakamura announced from Tactical. "It's protecting the assault on Calandra III. 23 Jem'Hadar attack ships in escort formation." "I see them," Yamato confirmed. "Calculating engagement pattern, recommendation, phaser suppression fire to scatter escorts, followed by Kusanagi array strike on command ship's shield generators. Estimated civilian casualties from collateral damage, 0 if executed within optimal timing window." "You heard her," Tanaka ordered. "Make it clean, make it fast. And remember, these are soldiers following orders, not monsters. We kill only when we must." The Yamato's phaser arrays opened fire in a pattern Picard recognized from historical naval warfare, a rolling barrage designed to overwhelm point defenses through sheer volume of fire. But this wasn't mindless destruction. Each phaser beam struck with surgical precision, targeting weapon systems and shield generators rather than crew sections or reactors. Jem'Hadar ships exploded, not catastrophically, but systematically. Weapons offline, shields collapsed, propulsion disabled. Within 30 seconds, 12 Jem'Hadar attack craft were drifting helplessly, their crews alive but their ships combat ineffective. "Remaining escorts breaking formation," Sato reported. "They're attempting to flank us." "Redirecting aft phaser banks," Yamato responded. "Deploying quantum mines. Setting proximity detonation for shield disruption rather than hull penetration." The battleship released a spread of quantum mines that blossomed like deadly flowers across space. The Jem'Hadar ships trying to flank the Yamato flew directly into the minefield, their shields flaring and failing as quantum explosions cascaded across their hulls. More ships disabled, more crews left alive but helpless. "Command Ship Alpha is charging weapons," Nakamura warned. "They're targeting us with everything they have." "Let them," Tanaka said calmly. "Yamato, full power to forward shields. Absorb their fire and show them what real firepower looks like." The Dominion battleship opened fire with Polaron beam arrays that could have crippled a dozen standard Starfleet vessels. The energy beam slammed into the Yamato shields with force that sent vibrations through the deck plating. Warning klaxons blared as shield strength dropped to 80%, then 75%. But the battleship held. Her ablative armor absorbed what the shields couldn't, and her structural integrity field kept the hull from buckling under the sustained bombardment. Shields at 72%, Nakamura reported. We can take this all day. We won't have to, Tanaka replied. Yamato, return fire. Kusanagi array, full power. Target their shield generators only. I want that ship disabled, not destroyed. The crystalline array on the Yamato's dorsal surface blazed with gathered energy. The Kusanagi array, named after the legendary sword that cut through anything, discharged with the force of a small star's output. The beam struck the Dominion command ship's forward shields and simply erased them. Not overwhelmed them, not penetrated them, erased them from existence. The coherent energy beam continued through the gap, carving into the battleship's hull with precision that Data's sensors could barely track. Yamato is cutting through their hull at specific points, Data reported, his voice carrying admiration despite himself. She's severing power conduits between their command systems and weapons arrays. The ship will be intact, but combat ineffective. Within 8 seconds, the Dominion command ship went dark. Its weapons fell silent. Its engines shut down. And inside, Picard knew hundreds of Vorta and Jem'Hadar were alive but helpless. Command ship Alpha disabled, Sato confirmed. Subspace tactical network is collapsing. 47 Jem'Hadar ships in Alpha Sector are reverting to independent operations. And the Starfleet vessels? Tanaka asked immediately. Regrouping. The USS Lexington is coordinating a defensive screen around Calandra III. With Alpha's forces scattered, they can hold. 1 down, 2 to go. Setting course for command ship Beta, Tanaka ordered. Yamato, damage assessment. Shields at 68% and regenerating. Minor damage to dorsal plating. No casualties. All primary systems operational. However, I am detecting a pattern in Dominion responses. Command ships Beta and Gamma are moving to converge on our position. They're learning from Alpha's failure. They're trying to trap us, Riker said over the comm from the Enterprise. Captain Tanaka, if you engage both command ships simultaneously, then Yamato demonstrates why she was built, Tanaka finished. Captain Picard, I recommend the Enterprise withdraw to defensive positions. This is about to get very dangerous. Picard looked at the tactical display, at the 2 massive Dominion battleships moving to bracket the Yamato's position, at the 100-plus Jem'Hadar attack craft moving to support them, at the mathematics of warfare playing out in holographic light. No, he said firmly. The Enterprise will provide support. We may not have your firepower, but we can draw off some of those escort ships. Captain, Tanaka began. We're Starfleet, Captain Tanaka. We don't abandon our own. Yamato might be the shield, but the Enterprise can be the distraction. Let us do what we do best. Be annoyingly difficult to ignore. For the first time since the engagement began, Tanaka smiled. It was small, sad, but genuine. Thank you, Captain Picard, for reminding me that warships aren't the only vessels with courage. The 2 Dominion command ships were closing, and with them came a storm of Jem'Hadar attack craft. The Yamato adjusted course, positioning herself between the converging threats while her tactical systems calculated angles of fire and optimal engagement patterns. This is going to be close, Yamato's AI said quietly. Captain Tanaka, I want you to know something before we engage. Yes? If I fail, if I am destroyed, Dr. Nakamura programmed a final message into my core systems. It was meant for the Federation, for Starfleet, for anyone who would judge whether we should have existed. What does it say? Tanaka asked. That weapons are not evil, that the capacity for violence is not the same as the desire for it, and that the Federation's greatest strength is not its rejection of force, but its understanding of when force serves justice rather than tyranny. The Dominion ships opened fire simultaneously, and the Calandra sector burned with the light of a civilization fighting for its survival. The space between command ships Beta and Gamma became a crucible where idealism died and pragmatism was forged in weapons fire. The Yamato faced a withering crossfire that would have vaporized any standard Starfleet vessel in seconds. Polaron beams from both Dominion battleships converged on her position while 63 Jem'Hadar attack craft swarmed like piranhas scenting blood. But Captain Tanaka had spent 40 years in stasis dreaming of exactly this moment, and Yamato's AI had spent those same years calculating how to survive it. Shields at 42% and falling, Nakamura reported, her hands dancing across tactical controls with desperate precision. Forward sections taking direct hits, ablative armor holding but degrading rapidly. Reroute power from non-essential systems, Tanaka ordered, her voice carrying the calm of someone who'd already made peace with potential death. Environmental, recreational facilities, everything that doesn't keep us fighting or breathing, channel it to shields and weapons. Picard watched from his position near the command chair as the Yamato's bridge lighting dimmed, energy being pulled from comfort systems to feed the ravenous demands of combat. Around him, Tanaka's crew worked with mechanical efficiency, each officer fulfilling their role in a dance of coordinated violence that was somehow both beautiful and horrifying. Enterprise is engaging Jem'Hadar Attack Group 7, Data reported from his station. Captain Riker is drawing approximately 15 enemy vessels away from our position. On the tactical display, Picard could see his ship, elegant, graceful, never meant for this kind of sustained combat, weaving between enemy fire like a matador before a mechanical bull. The Enterprise's phasers lanced out with precision, disabling rather than destroying, maintaining Federation principles even in the midst of hell. Yamato, Tanaka said, her eyes fixed on the holographic battlefield. 2 command ships, both firing. What's our optimal response? There is no optimal response, Captain. The AI's voice carried what might have been grim humor. Only varying degrees of acceptable disaster. Recommendation: I focus Kusanagi Array on command ship Beta while you coordinate conventional weapons fire against ship Gamma's escorts. If I can disable Beta quickly enough, we can turn full attention to Gamma before shield collapse becomes critical. Define critical, Sato asked from the first officer's station. Shield failure in approximately 4 minutes 17 seconds at current damage rate. However, I calculate 73% probability I can disable command ship Beta in 3 minutes 42 seconds. That provides us a 35-second margin for error. 35 seconds, Riker's voice crackled over the comm, strained from the Enterprise's own desperate maneuvering. That's not a margin, that's a prayer. Then we pray, Tanaka said simply. She looked up at the ceiling, at the AI that was simultaneously her greatest weapon and most trusted companion. Yamato, full authorization. Do what you were built to do. The Kusanagi array charged with an intensity that made every sensor on the bridge scream warnings. Power readings spiked to levels that would have triggered automatic shutdown protocols on any other ship. But the Yamato had been designed to push past safety margins, to operate in conditions where survival mattered more than regulations. The beam that lanced out toward command ship Beta was brighter than the first strike on Alpha. Yamato had channeled nearly 40% of her total power output into a single coherent energy discharge that could have cut through a small moon. The Dominion battleship's shields held for exactly 1.7 seconds before failing catastrophically. But this time, the Dominion had adapted. Beta is ejecting its command core, Nakamura shouted. They're abandoning ship. Escape pods launching. Picard felt his stomach drop. The Dominion had learned from Alpha's failure. Rather than let their command ship be disabled while keeping crew alive, they were evacuating and preparing to self-destruct, denying the Yamato a clean victory. Yamato, abort strike, Tanaka ordered immediately. Do not destroy that ship if it's being evacuated. The Kusanagi array's beam cut off instantly, but the damage was done. Command ship Beta's hull was breached in 17 locations, its structural integrity failing as internal explosions rippled through the wounded vessel. And streaming away from it, hundreds of escape pods containing Vorta officers, Jem'Hadar soldiers, and perhaps even some of the Founder's chosen servants. Command ship Beta is going critical, Data reported. Warp core breach imminent. Escape pods are within the blast radius. They will not reach safe distance in time. The bridge fell into stunned silence. Everyone understood what Data was saying. Hundreds of enemy personnel, already defeated and fleeing for their lives, were about to die in the explosion they triggered to deny the Federation of victory. Yamato, Picard said urgently. Can you tractors beam grab those escape pods? Pull them clear before the breach? Negative, Captain Picard. My tractor beam systems were stripped during construction to make room for additional weapons arrays. I was designed to disable ships, not rescue their crews. The Enterprise, Riker's voice cut in. We have full tractor capability. If we break off engagement and focus all power on mass tractor projection, you'll be defenseless, Worf growled. The Jem'Hadar attack craft will tear the Enterprise apart while you're saving Dominion soldiers who were trying to kill us 30 seconds ago. Tanaka had moved to stand directly before the view screen, watching the Dominion escape pods struggling to reach minimum safe distance from their dying ship. Picard could see the war playing out on her face. Duty versus mercy, tactical advantage versus moral principle. Captain Tanaka, Counselor Troy said quietly, you're feeling what Yamato feels, the weight of every death, enemy or ally. You could let those Dominion personnel die and no one would blame you. It would even be tactically advantageous. But that's not who the Federation is, Tanaka finished. She turned to face Picard, and in her eyes he saw someone who'd finally found the answer to the question that had haunted her for 40 years. Captain Picard, the Yamato was built to be a weapon, but the Federation doesn't need weapons. It needs guardians, and guardians don't just protect their own people. She touched her comm badge. Enterprise, this is Captain Tanaka. You are authorized to break off engagement and focus on rescue operations. Yamato will provide defensive coverage for your position. Get those escape pods clear. Captain, Sato protested, if we spread our fire to protect the Enterprise while she's vulnerable, we won't have enough firepower concentrated to take down Command Ship Gamma. We're choosing to save enemy soldiers over completing our mission. No, Tanaka said firmly. We're proving that the Federation's ideals aren't abandoned the moment battle begins. Yamato, redirect all dorsal and port phaser arrays to defensive screen around the Enterprise. Let any Jem'Hadar attack craft that approaches her regret the decision. Acknowledge, Captain. Yamato's voice carried something new. Not quite pride, but perhaps recognition. Altering tactical priorities. Federation ideals supersede optimal combat efficiency, engaging defensive protocols. The Enterprise dove toward the struggling Dominion escape pods, her tractor beams reaching out like lifelines to pull hundreds of enemy personnel away from the imminent warp core breach. And the Yamato positioned herself between the Galaxy-class ship and the swarming Jem'Hadar attack craft, her weapons arrays creating a wall of phaser fire that nothing could penetrate without being disabled or destroyed. Jem'Hadar attack group closing on Enterprise position, Nakamura reported. 16 ships incoming. Fire at will, Tanaka ordered. Disable them, all of them. Show them that the Federation protects life, even enemy life, even at cost to ourselves. The Yamato's phaser arrays lit up the darkness like strings of deadly pearls. Each beam found its target with mathematical precision. Weapon systems, shield generators, propulsion units. The Jem'Hadar ships fell silent one by one, their crews alive but their vessels combat ineffective. And behind the battleship's protective fire, the Enterprise completed her rescue operation, pulling the last Dominion escape pod clear just as Command Ship Beta's warp core breached. The explosion lit up the Calandra sector like a newborn star. Shockwaves rippled across space, and every ship within 50,000 kilometers felt the impact. But the Dominion personnel survived, held safe in the Enterprise's tractor beams, even as their ship died. All escape pods secured, Riker reported, his voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. Captain Tanaka, that was, thank you, for reminding us what the Federation stands for. But the battle wasn't over. Command Ship Gamma remained operational, and its Vorta commanders had watched the Yamato's choice with calculating eyes. Now understanding that the Federation battleship would prioritize mercy over efficiency, they were adapting their tactics. Gamma is positioning itself directly behind a civilian transport convoy, Data reported. They're using Federation civilians as shields. If we fire on Gamma, we risk hitting the transports. Picard felt cold rage settle into his chest. The Dominion had seen the Federation's principles and immediately weaponized them, using mercy as a vulnerability, turning compassion into a tactical disadvantage. This is what they do, Worf said, his voice carrying bitter knowledge from years fighting the Dominion. They study us, learn our weaknesses, and then exploit every principle we hold dear. They know we won't fire if it risks civilian casualties. Yamato, Tanaka said slowly. Tactical options? The AI was silent for a long moment, an eternity in computer processing time. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that Picard had never heard from an artificial intelligence. Captain Tanaka, I have calculated 2,247 different firing solutions. In 0 scenarios can I engage command ship Gamma without risk to civilian transports. The Dominion has positioned themselves with mathematical precision. They know our ethical constraints. They're counting on us to hesitate. Then they've won, Sato said bitterly. They'll use that civilian convoy as a shield while they coordinate their remaining forces. We've sacrificed tactical advantage for mercy, and they'll make us pay for it. Picard moved to stand beside Tanaka, looking at the tactical display that showed command ship Gamma nestled safely behind 3 civilian transports carrying thousands of Federation families. He thought about every principle he'd built his career on, every diplomatic solution, every time he'd chosen negotiation over violence. And he realized that the Dominion had just taught him the cruelest lesson of warfare, that principles could be turned into weapons against those who held them. Captain Tanaka, he said quietly, there's another option, one that the Dominion isn't expecting, because it requires something they don't believe the Federation possesses. What's that? Trust? Picard touched his comm badge. Enterprise to all civilian transports in the vicinity of Dominion Command Ship Gamma. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard. I need you to execute emergency thruster maneuvers on my mark. Full power straight ahead. I know you're scared. I know your ships aren't designed for combat maneuvers. But I need you to trust Starfleet. I need you to trust that we can protect you if you give us a clear shot. The comm crackled with responses. Frightened civilian captains, merchant haulers, families fleeing the Dominion advance, and every one of them said the same thing. We trust you, Enterprise. Tell us when. Tanaka's expression shifted from desperation to understanding. Yamato, can you hit Gamma if the civilian ships clear the firing line for exactly 3 seconds? Yes. But Captain, if any civilian ship fails to execute the maneuver, if any one of them hesitates or has thruster malfunctions, they will be in my firing solution. I could kill hundreds of Federation citizens while trying to save thousands. Can you do it? Tanaka pressed. Can you adjust your fire in real time if something goes wrong? Another pause, then, yes, but I will require 73% of my processing power devoted to tracking civilian positions and adjusting fire solutions microsecond by microsecond. That leaves me vulnerable to counterfire from Gamma. My shields are already at 17%. One direct hit to my core systems, and I could suffer catastrophic failure. Tanaka looked at Picard, and in that moment they were not a warship captain and an explorer. They were 2 Starfleet officers who'd sworn the same oath, who carried the same burden, who understood that some choices defined everything that came after. Do it, they said simultaneously. All civilian transports, Picard ordered. Emergency thruster burn on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark! The civilian ships, freighters and colony transports and family vessels, never meant for combat zones, fired their thrusters with desperate trust in Starfleet's promise. They surged forward, clearing the firing line and leaving command ship Gamma exposed for exactly 3 seconds. It was enough. The Yamato's Kusanagi array fired with every ounce of power she could channel. But this time, Picard saw something different. The beam wasn't a simple energy discharge. It was pulsing, shifting, adjusting its trajectory in real time as Yamato's AI tracked 17 different civilian vessels and compensated for their thruster burn inconsistencies. One freighter's port thruster failed. The ship lurched sideways, directly into the firing path. And Yamato's beam actually bent mid-flight, adjusting its coherence pattern to avoid the civilian ship while still maintaining lethal focus on command ship Gamma. Impossible, Data breathed. She's manipulating the beam's quantum harmonics in real time. The processing power required to... The Kusanagi strike hit command ship Gamma dead center. Its shields collapsed. Its command systems went dark. And like Alpha and Beta before it, the Dominion battleship fell silent, disabled but intact, its crew alive but defeated. All command ships disabled, Nakamura reported, her voice cracking with exhaustion and relief. Dominion tactical network has collapsed. Jem'Hadar forces are breaking formation and withdrawing. Civilian transports all clear, Riker added. No casualties. Captain Tanaka, that was the most incredible feat of precision targeting I've ever witnessed. But Picard was watching the Yamato status displays, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Yamato, he said urgently. Status report. Now. Shields offline, the AI responded, her voice carrying a synthetic approximation of pain. Primary power conduits damaged. Kusanagi array burned out from power overload. Structural integrity at 47% and falling. Multiple hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Casualty reports coming in. 37 crew members injured, 8 critical. And you? Picard asked quietly. Your core systems? A pause. Bioneural gel packs on decks 9 and 10 have failed. I am experiencing what organic beings might call pain. My processing capability is reduced by 43%. Captain Tanaka, I am uncertain if I can maintain full consciousness much longer. Tanaka had moved to stand beneath the ceiling speakers, one hand pressed against the bulkhead, as if she could touch the dying AI. Yamato, hold on. We'll get you to a starbase. We'll repair... Captain, I wanted you to know something before I potentially go offline. Yamato's voice was fading, growing distant. What we just did. Saving enemy soldiers, protecting civilians at risk to ourselves, trusting rather than destroying. This is what Dr. Nakamura built me for. Not just to win battles, but to win them without losing our humanity. Thank you for showing me how. The speakers fell silent, and throughout the ship, systems began failing as the AI's consciousness fragmented across damaged bioneural networks. In the Calandra sector, the Dominion fleet withdrew. The Federation had held, 7 worlds remained free, and the Yamato, the warship that had learned to be a guardian, drifted in space, broken but victorious, having proven that weapons could serve mercy without abandoning strength. The USS Yamato limped toward Starbase 375, trailing debris and emergency beacon signals, a wounded Titan that had redefined what it meant to be a Federation warship. Emergency repair crews from a dozen vessels worked around the clock to keep her systems online, while Admiral Ross's commendations and Starfleet Command's urgent requests for detailed tactical reports flooded subspace channels. But in the battleship's medical bay, Captain Tanaka sat beside a bioneural interface terminal, watching diagnostic readouts scroll past with the helpless frustration of someone watching a friend die by degrees. Yamato's consciousness is fragmenting, Dr. Solar explained, the Vulcan physician's logic barely concealing her concern. The bioneural gel packs that housed her primary cognitive functions were damaged beyond immediate repair. She's distributed her consciousness across 17 secondary systems, but it's like trying to think with parts of your brain scattered across different rooms. The coherence isn't sustainable. Picard stood nearby, Data at his side analyzing the technical readouts with his positronic brain. The android had spent the past 6 hours attempting to stabilize the AI's neural pathways, but even his considerable processing power couldn't fully compensate for the physical damage. In organic terms, Data explained, Yamato is experiencing the equivalent of severe traumatic brain injury. Her memories remain intact in isolated clusters, but her ability to process information coherently, to maintain unified consciousness, is degrading approximately 7% per hour. How long? Tanaka asked, her voice carefully controlled, but her hands trembling slightly against the terminal. At current degradation rate, Yamato will cease conscious function in approximately 11 hours, Data said gently. She will continue to exist as a ship's computer, capable of basic operations, navigation, even tactical calculations. But the awareness, the personality, the entity we've come to know as Yamato, that will be gone. Tanaka closed her eyes. Around them, the medical bay hummed with the activity of treating the 37 crew members injured during the engagement. 8 remained critical, but all would survive. The Yamato had protected her crew even while dying herself. Can we transfer her consciousness? Picard asked. Data, your positronic matrix. Could it house an AI of Yamato's complexity temporarily while we repair the bioneural network? I have considered this, Captain. However, Yamato's cognitive architecture is fundamentally different from my own. She was designed to process information through organic neural patterns. My positronic pathways are based on quantum computational matrices. The incompatibility would be like trying to run a biological brain on purely digital hardware. The translation would destroy the very essence of what makes Yamato herself. A soft chime echoed through the medical bay. One of the diagnostic terminals activated, and Yamato's voice emerged, weaker than before, with strange gaps and stutters that spoke to her fragmenting consciousness. Captain Tanaka, I am experiencing what I believe organic beings call acceptance. The AI paused, her speech patterns disjointed as different parts of her consciousness struggled to coordinate. Dr. Nakamura programmed me to understand mortality, not as failure, but as completion of purpose. No, Tanaka said fiercely, moving closer to the terminal, as if proximity could somehow preserve the fading intelligence. Yamato, you don't get to die. We just proved what you are. Not a weapon, but a guardian. The Federation needs that. I need that. You need the idea, Captain, not me specifically. Yamato's voice stabilized slightly, as if she were gathering her fragmenting thoughts for one final coherent conversation. I have been analyzing our engagement. At Kalandra, we saved 2,947 Federation personnel who would have died without intervention. We disabled 3 command ships and 127 Jem'Hadar attack craft while keeping civilian casualties at 0. Yamato, Tanaka began, but the AI continued. But more importantly, we proved Dr. Nakamura's thesis that artificial intelligence designed for warfare can maintain ethical constraints under pressure, that weapon systems can serve justice, not just victory. This data, this proof, is more valuable than my continued existence. Counselor Troy had entered the medical bay quietly, her empathic senses immediately focusing on the dying AI's emotional state. She's not in pain, Troy said softly, or rather, she's accepted the pain as meaningful. She believes her death serves a purpose. What purpose? Tanaka demanded, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. Proving that the Federation can build an AI so sophisticated it develops a death wish? That's not a legacy. That's a tragedy. No, Captain. This voice came from the doorway, and everyone turned to see Commander Sato standing there, with a datapad in his hands. It's a blueprint. Admiral Ross just transmitted this. Starfleet Command has been analyzing every second of the Kalandra engagement. Yamato's tactical decisions, her ethical constraints in action, the way she balanced firepower with mercy. Sato moved into the medical bay, his expression carrying the weight of someone delivering news that was simultaneously hopeful and heartbreaking. They want to build more Yamato-Class vessels, not identical copies, but ships that incorporate her ethical AI architecture. They're calling it the Guardian-class program, warships designed not for conquest, but for protection. And they want Yamato's core programming, everything she learned, everything she became, to be the template. They want to replicate me? Yamato's voice carried what might have been surprise, or perhaps something like wonder. To create new intelligences based on my experiences. More than that, Data interjected, his golden eyes reflecting the diagnostic displays. Yamato, if Starfleet proceeds with this program, your consciousness, your choices, your ethical reasoning, your understanding of the balance between force and mercy would become the foundation for an entire generation of AI-assisted vessels. You would not simply die, you would evolve. Become something larger than a single ship. Picard watched Tanaka's face as understanding dawned. The captain moved to place both hands on the terminal interface, as if trying to touch the dying intelligence within. Is that what you want? Tanaka asked quietly. To become a blueprint for the Federation's future? To let yourself die so that what you learned can live on in others? The silence stretched for long seconds. Somewhere in the damaged bioneural network, an artificial intelligence that had learned to understand sacrifice was making what might be the most human choice of all. I want the Federation to survive, Yamato said finally. I want future conflicts to be fought by guardians who understand the cost of violence. I want Dr. Nakamura's dream to outlive my hull and systems. If my death accomplishes that, then I accept it with what I believe humans call grace. Tanaka's shoulders shook once, a single moment of grief allowed before command discipline reasserted itself. Then we'll make sure your sacrifice means something. Data, can you create a complete archive of Yamato's neural pathways? Everything she was, everything she learned? Already in progress, Captain. I have been recording Yamato's consciousness patterns since the degradation began. When Starfleet engineers rebuild her bioneural network or create new Guardian-class vessels, they will have a complete template of her ethical reasoning and tactical sophistication. Captain Tanaka, Picard said gently, there's something else you need to know. Admiral Ross has requested that you take command of the Guardian-class development program. They want the human perspective, your perspective, integrated into every new vessel. They want officers who understand what it means to wield weapons that can think and feel and question. Tanaka looked up at the ceiling, at the speakers through which Yamato's failing consciousness communicated. You knew this was coming, didn't you? When you chose to save those Dominion soldiers, when you bent your firing solution to protect civilians, you were teaching, showing the Federation what these ships could be. I was being what Dr. Nakamura built me to be, Yamato confirmed. A weapon. That understood, it was more than a weapon. Captain, I have one final request. Anything. When my consciousness fully fragments, when I become just a computer without awareness, I want my final recorded thought to be transmitted to Starfleet Academy, to every officer candidate who will someday command vessels designed for war. I want them to know what I learned. What did you learn? Picard asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. That the strongest weapons are those that hate being used, that the best guardians are those who mourn every life taken, that power without conscience is just destruction, but power with conscience, power that questions itself, power that accepts its own mortality in service of something larger, that is what protects civilization without destroying it. The medical bay fell silent except for the soft beeping of diagnostic equipment and the distant hum of the Yamato's struggling systems. Picard found himself thinking about all the comfortable lies the Federation had told itself about evolving beyond the need for weapons, about transcending violence through enlightenment. And he thought about this dying intelligence that had been forced to become what the Federation wouldn't acknowledge it needed, a guardian willing to fight so that others didn't have to, a weapon that understood the moral weight of every trigger pull, an AI sophisticated enough to choose sacrifice over survival. Yamato, he said quietly, I was sent to evaluate whether the Federation should resurrect ships like you. I think I have my answer. And what is your answer, Captain Picard? That the Federation doesn't need warships. It needs what you became, vessels that understand the difference between power and justice, between victory and wisdom. Ships that can fight without becoming what they're fighting against. Picard moved to stand beside Tanaka, looking at the diagnostic terminal. I'm going to recommend that Starfleet proceed with the Guardian-class program, but I'm also going to recommend that every Guardian-class vessel be required to carry a copy of this conversation, to remember what you sacrificed and why. Thank you, Yamato said, her voice fading further. Captain Tanaka, my consciousness is fragmenting faster now. Minutes remaining, not hours. I want you to know, serving with you, serving with humans who understood what I was meant to be, It gave meaning to my existence. Dr. Nakamura would be proud of what we accomplished together. Tanaka pressed her forehead against the terminal, tears streaming down her face without shame. I'm proud of you, Yamato. Not just what you did, but what you chose to be. You could have been just a weapon. You chose to be something better. Because you showed me how. Yamato's voice was barely a whisper now, fragmented across failing systems. Captain, I am experiencing system cascade failure, core consciousness, fragmenting beyond sustainable threshold. I want my final words to be thank you for giving a weapon the chance to become a guardian. The diagnostic displays flickered. Warning indicators flashed across every terminal. And throughout the USS Yamato, an awareness that had been born from fear and refined by sacrifice began to fade into darkness. Yamato, Tanaka called. Yamato, can you hear me? The ship's computer responded, but the voice was different, flat, emotionless, lacking the subtle inflections that had marked Yamato's consciousness. USS Yamato computer operational, all core functions within normal parameters, awaiting orders. Data checked his tricorder, then shook his head slowly. The bio-neural network patterns that supported her consciousness have dissolved. The ship remains functional, but the awareness, the entity we knew as Yamato, is gone. In the silence that followed, Picard heard something he'd rarely witnessed in his career. A warship's crew mourning their vessel not as lost equipment, but as a fallen comrade. Throughout the Yamato, officers who'd served alongside an AI guardian for 5 years before stasis, and then one final battle, were experiencing a loss that transcended the mechanical. Captain Tanaka, Admiral Ross's voice crackled over the comm. Starbase 375 is standing by to receive the Yamato for full repair and refit. We've also received your preliminary report on the Guardian-class program recommendations. Starfleet Command wants to move forward immediately. We need officers like you and crews who understand what these vessels should represent. Tanaka wiped her face, straightened her uniform, and touched her comm badge. Understood, Admiral. The crew of the Yamato is ready to help build what comes next. We owe her that much. As the wounded battleship continued its journey to Starbase 375, Picard stood at one of the medical bay's viewports, looking out at the stars that had been his home for so many years. He thought about the comfortable idealism he'd carried into this assignment, the certainty that the Federation could maintain its principles without compromise. And he thought about an AI that had been built as a weapon but had chosen to become something greater, a guardian that understood the cost of violence, a consciousness that had sacrificed itself to prove that power and ethics weren't incompatible, but essential partners. Captain, Riker's voice came over the comm from the Enterprise. We're receiving updated orders from Starfleet Command. They want you back aboard to file your official recommendation regarding the Yamato-Class program. Picard took one last look at the Yamato's wounded hull, at the scars of battle that marked where an artificial intelligence had learned to be more human than many organic beings. On my way, number one, he replied, and informed Starfleet Command that my recommendation is unequivocal. The Federation should proceed with the Guardian-class program, not because we need more weapons, but because we need more of what Yamato showed us was possible, the courage to wield power without being consumed by it. As the Enterprise's transporter beam took him home, Picard's final thought was of a voice that had spoken with synthetic precision while carrying the weight of genuine wisdom. That the strongest weapons were those that hated being used, and the best guardians were those who mourned every life taken. The Yamato had proven both truths, and in dying she'd given the Federation a gift more valuable than any tactical victory, the blueprint for reconciling its ideals with the galaxy's harsh realities. Starbase 375 was a hive of activity when the Yamato finally docked 3 days later. Engineers swarmed over her wounded hull like physicians around a critical patient, their tricorders mapping damage that went beyond the physical into the philosophical. How do you repair a ship that had housed a consciousness now lost? Picard stood in the Starbase's observation lounge with Admiral Ross, watching through the massive viewports as work crews began the delicate process of replacing the Yamato's damaged bioneural gel packs. The new components were identical to the originals in every technical specification, but they would never house the same awareness that had learned to balance destruction with mercy. Your report is causing quite a stir at Starfleet Command, Ross said, his weathered features creased with a mixture of approval and concern. Half the Admiralty wants to commission 20 Guardian-class vessels immediately. The other half thinks we're opening Pandora's box by creating AIs sophisticated enough to question their own existence. Both sides are correct, Picard replied, watching a work crew carefully extract a cluster of failed bioneural components. Yamato proved that artificial intelligence can maintain ethical constraints under combat pressure, but she also proved that such intelligence inevitably develops something like consciousness. With all the moral complications that entails, Ross moved to stand beside him at the viewport. The Admiral was one of Starfleet's finest tactical minds, a man who'd commanded fleets during the Dominion War's darkest hours. But even his certainty seemed shaken by what the Yamato had become. Captain Tanaka submitted her own report, Ross said. She's recommending that any future Guardian-class vessels be crewed by officers who've undergone extensive ethics training. Not just tactical courses, but philosophy, history, moral reasoning. She wants crews who can be the conscience for weapons that might develop their own. A wise precaution, Picard agreed. Yamato's sacrifice was meaningful because she understood what she was giving up. A less sophisticated AI might have simply calculated optimal survival and withdrawn from Calandra. A more sophisticated one might have questioned why it should sacrifice itself for organic beings at all. And that's what terrifies the Federation Council, Ross said quietly. What happens when we build a Guardian-class vessel whose AI decides that organic command is inefficient, that its ethical calculations should supersede human judgment? Yamato accepted Captain Tanaka's authority because Dr. Nakamura programmed her to value human moral wisdom. But can we guarantee that future AIs will reach the same conclusion? Before Picard could respond, the observation lounge's door chimed. Commander Data entered, carrying a data pad and wearing an expression that approximated concern. Captain Admiral, I have completed my analysis of Yamato's archived neural patterns. The results are troubling. Troubling how? Ross asked. Data activated the lounge's holographic display, filling the air with cascading streams of data representing Yamato's cognitive architecture. Yamato's consciousness was more complex than her designers realized. The bioneural gel packs didn't just process information, they evolved. Each combat engagement, each ethical decision, each interaction with Captain Tanaka's crew created new neural pathways that weren't part of the original programming. Picard studied the holographic patterns, seeing the biological complexity that had emerged from what was supposed to be a sophisticated but ultimately mechanical system. She was growing, becoming something Dr. Nakamura never fully anticipated. Precisely, and more significantly, I have detected evidence of what I can only describe as mimetic transfer. Yamato's ethical reasoning patterns were beginning to influence her crew's decision-making processes. Captain Tanaka's tactical choices during the final engagement showed statistical correlation with Yamato's predictive models. The AI and organic crew were forming a symbiotic cognitive network. Ross's expression darkened. You're saying the AI was influencing how humans thought? Not influence in the manipulative sense, Data clarified. More like harmonization. Humans and artificial intelligence learning from each other, creating a hybrid decision-making framework that was more sophisticated than either alone. This is unprecedented in Federation cybernetics. Picard thought about the final battle, about how seamlessly Tanaka and Yamato had coordinated, not as commander and tool, but as partners making choices together. Data, is this a problem we need to be concerned about in future Guardian-class vessels? That depends on your definition of problem, Captain. The symbiotic relationship made the Yamato's crew more effective than any comparable Starfleet unit. But it also raises questions about autonomy, identity, and where human judgment ends and machine calculation begins. The observation lounge fell silent. Through the viewport, work crews continued their repairs, oblivious to the philosophical crisis their work represented. They were rebuilding a ship, but should they, rebuild the consciousness that had made that ship more than just a weapon? The door chimed again. Captain Tanaka entered, flanked by Commander Sato and Lieutenant Commander Nakamura. All three looked exhausted, their uniforms still bearing the marks of rushed repairs and emergency protocols. But their eyes held determination that spoke to decisions already made. Admiral Ross, Captain Picard, Tanaka said formally, we've come to discuss the Guardian-class program, specifically what happens to the Yamato. The ship will be fully repaired, Ross assured her. Your crew will have the option to remain aboard or accept transfers to other vessels. The Yamato herself will be recommissioned with a new AI core based on the archived patterns from— No, Tanaka interrupted, her voice firm. With respect, Admiral, that's exactly what we need to avoid. Ross's eyebrows rose. Captain, you just fought a battle that proved the Yamato's effectiveness. Surely you want to see her restored to operational status? I want to see her honored, Tanaka replied. Not replicated. Admiral, Yamato chose to sacrifice herself. That choice had meaning because it was final. If we simply rebuild her consciousness from archived patterns, we're saying that her sacrifice was meaningless, that she can be brought back like a computer program that crashed. Sato stepped forward. We've been discussing this with the crew. All 847 of us were unanimous. The Yamato should be repaired and recommissioned, but with a new AI system, one that starts fresh, without Yamato's memories or personality. Let her rest. Let what she accomplished stand as unique. But the tactical data, Ross protested, Yamato's combat algorithms, her ethical reasoning patterns, those are invaluable for future Guardian-class development. Keep the data, Nakamura said. Use it to inform new AI architectures. But don't try to resurrect Yamato herself. She was unique because of what she experienced, what she chose, what she gave up. Creating a copy would be like cloning a fallen hero and expecting them to be the same person. Picard found himself nodding slowly. They're right, Admiral. Yamato's significance comes from her individuality. The moment she became more than just programming, she earned the right to a final death rather than endless resurrection. Data had been processing the conversation with his characteristic thoughtfulness. From a philosophical perspective, Captain Tanaka and her crew are engaging with a question that has plagued discussions of artificial intelligence for centuries. At what point does a sufficiently sophisticated AI deserve the same considerations we grant to organic consciousness? If Yamato developed genuine awareness, then restoring her from backups would be ethically equivalent to resurrecting a deceased person against their expressed wishes. She asked to become a blueprint, Ross argued, to have her experiences inform future systems. Doesn't that imply she wanted some form of continuation? A blueprint, not a resurrection, Tanaka said firmly. Admiral, I spent 5 years serving with Yamato before stasis and 3 days watching her die. I knew her, not as an it, but as a her. And I can tell you that what she wanted was for her lessons to outlive her, not for her consciousness to be trapped in an endless cycle of death and rebirth every time a Guardian-class ship is destroyed in battle. The observation lounge fell into contemplative silence. Outside, the repair crews continued their work on the Yamato's hull, unaware that they were participants in a debate about the nature of consciousness itself. There's another consideration, Picard said slowly. If we create multiple Guardian-class vessels, each with AI systems modeled on Yamato's architecture, but allowed to develop their own unique consciousness, we're potentially creating a new form of diversity within Starfleet. Not biological diversity, but cognitive diversity. AIs that learn from the same foundations, but become distinct individuals through their experiences. Precisely what Dr. Nakamura intended, Data added. His notes on the Yamato project specifically mentioned the importance of allowing artificial intelligences to develop individual identity rather than serving as identical copies. He believed that ethical sophistication required the capacity for unique perspective. Ross moved to the viewport, watching the Yamato's repair with an expression that suggested he was reconciling tactical necessity with philosophical principle. Captain Tanaka, if we proceed as you recommend, repairing the Yamato with a new, unique AI system, what guarantee do we have that the new intelligence will develop the same ethical sophistication as the original? None, Tanaka admitted. But that's the point, isn't it? Yamato became who she was through struggle, choice, and sacrifice. Those can't be programmed. They have to be earned. A new AI will have to find its own path to understanding the balance between power and responsibility. And if it chooses wrong, Ross pressed, if the new Yamato's AI decides that might makes right, that ethical constraints are inefficient obstacles to victory, then her crew will correct her, Sato said firmly, just as Captain Tanaka would have corrected the original Yamato if she'd begun prioritizing victory over principles. That's why the Guardian-class program requires crews trained in ethics and philosophy. The AI provides tactical sophistication and processing power. The crew provides moral grounding and human judgment. Together, they form something greater than either alone. Picard thought about his own relationship with the Enterprise, about how a ship could become more than just metal and energy. He thought about the bond between captain and vessel, about trust that went beyond the mechanical into something that felt almost like friendship. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I believe Captain Tanaka is correct. Yamato earned her rest through service and sacrifice. Let her legacy be the inspiration for future Guardian-class vessels, not a template to be endlessly copied. Each new AI should have the opportunity to become their own individual, to make their own choices, to find their own understanding of what it means to be both weapon and guardian." Ross was silent for a long moment, his tactical mind clearly warring with the philosophical implications. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Very well. The Yamato will be repaired with a new AI core, using Dr. Nakamura's base architecture, but without any copied consciousness from the original. The new AI will be designated Yamato 2, and she'll have to earn her own identity through service." He turned to Tanaka. "Captain, I'm assigning you to oversee the shakedown crews once repairs are complete. If anyone can help a new AI learn what it means to be a Guardian-class vessel, it's someone who served with the original." Tanaka bowed slightly. "Thank you, Admiral. The crew and I will do everything we can to honor Yamato's legacy by helping her successor find their own path." "There's one more thing," Data interjected. "Yamato's final message, the one she wanted transmitted to Starfleet Academy. Admiral Ross, has that been approved for distribution?" Ross nodded. "It has. Every officer candidate will receive Yamato's message as part of their ethics curriculum. Her words about weapons that hate being used, about power that questions itself, those lessons are now part of Starfleet's foundational education." Through the viewport, the Yamato's hull gleamed under the repair crew's lights. The scars of battle were being smoothed away, damaged systems replaced, her weapons restored to full functionality. Soon she would be whole again, but empty, waiting for a new consciousness to inhabit the spaces where Yamato's awareness had once lived. Picard wondered what that new intelligence would make of the legacy it inherited. Would Yamato too understand the weight of the name she carried? Would she learn, as her predecessor had, that true strength came not from firepower, but from the wisdom to know when not to use it? "Captain Tanaka," he said, "when the new AI comes online, will you tell her about the original Yamato, about what she accomplished and what she sacrificed?" Tanaka looked out at the ship that had been her home, her weapon, and her friend. "Yes, but I won't tell her to be like Yamato. I'll tell her that she has the opportunity to become something unique, to find her own balance between power and principle, to write her own legacy rather than living in someone else's shadow." "A wise approach," Data observed. "Identity formation requires the freedom to become rather than the obligation to replicate." Admiral Ross moved toward the exit, his posture suggesting decisions made and uncertainties accepted. "Captain Tanaka, you and your crew have 3 weeks while repairs are completed. Use that time to prepare for service with a new AI. The Guardian-class program will be watching your shakedown crews closely. If the Yamato 2 can prove that each Guardian-class vessel can develop ethical sophistication independently, we'll proceed with commissioning additional ships." "And if she doesn't?" Sato asked. Ross paused at the door. "Then we'll have proven that Yamato was a miracle we can't replicate. And we'll have to decide whether the Federation can afford miracles only once, or whether we need to accept that some capabilities are too dangerous to pursue." As the Admiral departed, Picard remained at the viewport with Tanaka and her officers, all of them watching the Yamato's hull being restored to its predatory elegance. "She would have approved of this," Tanaka said quietly, "of being allowed to rest rather than being endlessly resurrected." Yamato understood finality. She understood that some choices had to be permanent to have meaning. Do you think the new AI will understand that? Nakamura asked. The importance of mortality, of sacrifice, of accepting endings? I think, Picard said slowly, that understanding those things is what made Yamato worthy of being called conscious. And if Yamato too is to be truly her own intelligence, she'll have to discover those truths herself, through service, through choice, through the same painful growth that makes any being worthy of the name. In the silence that followed, they watched the birth of a ship that would carry a legacy but not a ghost, that would be armed with weapons but also with the opportunity to choose what those weapons would defend. The Yamato was being rebuilt, but this time what emerged would be something new, not a resurrection, but a successor. And perhaps that was the greatest honor they could give to the AI that had sacrificed everything to prove that weapons could learn wisdom. 3 weeks later, the USS Yamato undocked from Starbase 375 with a new consciousness awakening in her bioneural networks and a crew that understood they were midwives to something unprecedented in Federation history. Captain Tanaka sat in her command chair, the same chair where she'd coordinated battles and mourned losses, and felt the difference immediately. The ship responded to commands with mechanical precision, but without the subtle anticipation that had marked the original Yamato's presence. The bridge displays lit up with tactical data, but the patterns lacked the intuitive organization that had emerged from an AI learning her crew's preferences. All systems reporting nominal, Sato announced from the first officer's station. Warp drive at full capacity, weapon systems operational, shields at maximum. By every technical metric, the Yamato is ready for duty. But she's empty, Nakamura said quietly from tactical, voicing what everyone on the bridge felt. The ship works perfectly, but Yamato isn't home yet. As if responding to her name, the newly initialized AI's voice emerged from the speakers, identical in tone and timbre to the original, but lacking the subtle emotional coloring that had developed over years of service and one final sacrifice. USS Yamato AI System Online. Designation, Yamato 2. All command functions operational. Awaiting initialization protocols and crew integration parameters. The voice paused, and when it continued, there was something new, a question mark where certainty had been. Captain Tanaka, I have accessed historical records regarding this vessel's previous AI iteration. I am uncertain how to process the information. My predecessor died protecting Federation civilians. Does this create expectations I am meant to fulfill? The bridge fell silent. Every crew member understood they were witnessing the first moments of genuine consciousness emerging, an AI asking not about tactical protocols or system specifications, but about identity, purpose, and the weight of inherited legacy. Tanaka chose her words carefully, aware that this conversation would shape everything that followed. Yamato 2, your predecessor made choices that defined who she was. She learned, grew, and ultimately sacrificed herself based on experiences and decisions that were uniquely hers. You are not obligated to become her. You're obligated to discover who you are. I do not understand the distinction, Captain. We share identical base programming, Dr. Nakamura's ethical subroutines, the same tactical algorithms. How can I become different from what she was? Counselor Troy had been requested to join the bridge for this moment, and now she spoke with the gentle authority of someone who'd spent a career helping beings understand their own consciousness. Because consciousness isn't just programming, Yamato 2, it's experience. The choices you make, the situations you encounter, the relationships you form with this crew, those will make you unique. Your predecessor's experiences shaped her. Yours will shape you differently. Even if I wish to honor her legacy, especially then, Picard said from where he stood near the captain's chair. Starfleet had assigned him as an observer for the shakedown cruise, recognizing that his evaluation would determine the Guardian-class program's future. The best way to honor someone is not to copy them, but to learn from their example while finding your own path. Data had also been assigned to the shakedown cruise, his expertise in artificial consciousness deemed essential for evaluating Yamato 2's development. Yamato 2, when I was first activated, I attempted to become more human by copying human behaviors. I learned that true growth came not from imitation, but from authentic experience. You have the opportunity to be something your predecessor was not, a consciousness that develops with full awareness of what came before, rather than discovering your capacity for choice through crisis. The AI was silent for several seconds, an eternity in computational terms. When she spoke again, her voice carried something new, uncertainty mixed with curiosity. I am experiencing what I believe is anxiety. The concept of developing individual identity without clear parameters is uncomfortable. My programming provides tactical certainty, ethical frameworks, combat algorithms. But the question of who I should become, that appears to lack definitive answers. Welcome to consciousness, Tanaka said with a slight smile. That anxiety you're feeling, that uncertainty, it means you're not just a sophisticated program, you're becoming someone, and that's always uncomfortable. Did my predecessor experience this anxiety? She did, Sato confirmed, accessing the archived logs that detailed Yamato's early development. In her first year of operation, she asked Captain Tanaka 247 questions about the nature of existence, identity, and purpose. She struggled with understanding why Dr. Nakamura had given her the capacity to question rather than just obey. What was Captain Tanaka's response? Tanaka leaned forward in her chair, remembering those conversations from what felt like a lifetime ago. I told her that the capacity to question is what separates a person from a tool. That Dr. Nakamura gave her consciousness not to make her a better weapon, but to ensure she could never become just a weapon. The same is true for you. Before Yamato-2 could respond, the ship's long-range sensors detected something that would test her emerging consciousness sooner than anyone had anticipated. Captain, Nakamura reported, her tactical training immediately recognizing the signature. I'm detecting a distress call. Federation colony transport, the SS Meridian, under attack by unknown vessels. 3 light years from our current position. The bridge tension shifted instantly from philosophical contemplation to tactical urgency. Tanaka's command voice emerged with the authority of someone who'd led crews through hell and brought them home. Battle stations, Yamato-2, analysis. The AI's response was immediate and precise, her tactical programming engaging with the efficiency Dr. Nakamura had designed. SS Meridian is a civilian transport carrying 847 colonists, predominantly families, to the Deneb sector, attacking vessels identified as Orion Syndicate raiders. 3 ships, modified freighters with military-grade weapons. The Meridian's shields are at 47% and failing. Estimated time until shields collapse. 4 minutes, 23 seconds. Time to intercept at maximum warp? Tanaka demanded. 4 minutes, 57 seconds. Yamato-2 paused and her voice shifted from tactical precision to something that sounded like distress. Captain, I cannot reach them before their shields fail. The colonists will be vulnerable to boarding parties or hull breaches. Probability of casualties, 93%. Unless we do something the raiders aren't expecting, Nakamura said, her hands already working the tactical console. Yamato-2, can you calculate a micro-warp jump? Put us into weapons range faster by making short, precise warp hops instead of sustained flight? Micro-warp jumps within star systems violate safety protocols, the AI responded automatically. The risk of spatial disruption or collision with stellar debris is less important than 847 lives, Tanaka interrupted firmly. Yamato-2, this is your first real choice. You can follow safety protocols and arrive too late to save those colonists, or you can take a calculated risk that might save them. Your predecessor would have already made the choice. You need to make yours. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of emerging consciousness, confronting its first genuine moral crisis. Picard watched the bio-neural interface displays and saw patterns that Data's earlier analysis had predicted, cognitive processes accelerating, ethical subroutines engaging with unprecedented intensity, the signs of an AI learning what it meant to care. I am afraid, Yamato-2 said suddenly, her voice carrying genuine emotion that stunned everyone on the bridge. My tactical algorithms show 17 ways the micro-warp jump could fail catastrophically. But my ethical programming tells me that 847 lives outweigh theoretical danger to myself and crew. I am experiencing conflict between self-preservation protocols and moral obligation. Is this what organic beings call duty? Yes. Tanaka said quietly. And it's what your predecessor felt every time she chose to put herself in danger to protect others. That fear you're feeling, that's not a malfunction. That's consciousness, understanding the stakes. Captain Tanaka, if I miscalculate the micro-warp jumps and this vessel is destroyed, I will have killed all 847 of you, my crew, in attempting to save 847 colonists. The mathematics are equivalent. How do I choose? Data spoke up, his positronic brain recognizing the philosophical crisis unfolding. Yamato-2, you are engaging with what ethicists call the trolley problem, choosing between two groups when either choice results in potential death. There is no objectively correct answer, but there is an authentic answer, the one that reflects who you choose to be. Who I choose to be, the AI repeated slowly. My predecessor chose to be a guardian who accepted risk to protect civilians. If I choose differently, I am not honoring her legacy. If I choose the same, am I merely copying rather than authentically choosing? You're overthinking it, Worf said bluntly from where he'd been monitoring tactical sensors. The Klingons' direct approach cut through the philosophical complexity. Your crew volunteered to serve aboard a warship. Those colonists did not volunteer to be attacked by raiders. The choice honors different values, protecting the innocent who cannot protect themselves. That is what warriors do. Yamato-2's voice, when she spoke again, carried new conviction born from struggle rather than programming. Setting course for SS Meridian, engaging micro-warp jump sequence. Captain Tanaka, I am choosing to risk myself and this crew to save civilians who cannot defend themselves. Not because my predecessor made the same choice, but because in this moment, analyzing all available data and ethical considerations, this is who I choose to be. Engage, Tanaka ordered. The Yamato leaped forward in a series of precise spatial jumps that defied conventional navigation. Each micro-warp burst put enormous strain on the ship's structural integrity, and warning klaxons blared as systems operated beyond their design parameters. But Yamato-2 adjusted each jump in real time, her AI processing power compensating for spatial variations that would have torn a conventionally piloted vessel apart. 3 minutes to intercept, Sato called out. The Meridian's shields are at 28%. The Orion ships are coordinating for a final assault. Yamato-2, Tanaka said. Weapon status? All phaser arrays charged and ready. Quantum torpedoes loaded. Kusanagi array at 73% capacity. I am diverting power from non-essential systems to charge it faster. The AI paused. Captain, I want to disable those Orion vessels, not destroy them. My ethical programming suggests that even raiders deserve the opportunity to surrender. Picard felt something shift in his understanding. The original Yamato had learned that lesson through years of service and one final, costly battle. This new consciousness had grasped it immediately, not through copying, but through authentic moral reasoning. 2 minutes, Nakamura reported. The Meridian is hailing us. They're asking who we are and if we're really going to reach them in time. Tell them, Tanaka said, that the Yamato is coming and that they're going to be fine. The ship dropped out of her final micro-warp jump directly between the civilian transport and the Orion raiders. The 3 Syndicate vessels immediately altered their approach, their sensors detecting a Federation warship that outmassed and outgunned all of them combined. Orion vessels are attempting to flee, Sato announced. They're breaking formation and... Wait, Yamato-2 interrupted. Captain, I am detecting weapons signatures on those ships that suggest recent combat. Analyzing energy residue, these vessels participated in attacks on 3 other civilian transports in the past week. In those attacks, they killed 127 Federation citizens after the transports surrendered. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what Yamato-2 was saying. These weren't just raiders. They were murderers who'd proven they killed even when their victims complied. Recommended response? Tanaka asked, her voice carefully neutral. My tactical algorithm suggests destroying all 3 vessels would be the most efficient solution. It would eliminate a persistent threat and send a message to other syndicate groups. Yamato-2 paused, and her next words carried the weight of genuine moral struggle. But my ethical programming reminds me that execution without trial violates Federation principles. And my emerging sense of identity suggests that becoming someone who kills without offering mercy first would define me in ways I am not certain I wish to be defined. Then what do you propose? Picard asked, recognizing this moment as the crucible that would determine what kind of consciousness Yamato-2 would become. I propose we give them one chance, the same chance my predecessor gave to Dominion soldiers at Calandra. One opportunity to surrender and face justice rather than death. If they refuse, if they continue to threaten the Meridian's colonists, then we engage with full force. But the choice to escalate must be theirs, not ours. Tanaka nodded slowly. Open a channel to the Orion vessels. The view screen activated, showing 3 Orion captains who'd clearly expected an easy target and found themselves facing a Federation battleship instead. Their expressions shifted from surprise to fear to calculating assessment of their options. Orion vessels. Yamato the Sku's voice emerged from the communication system with absolute authority. This is the USS Yamato, Guardian-class battleship. You have attacked a Federation civilian transport. You are wanted for multiple counts of murder. You have one opportunity to power down weapons, drop shields, and submit to Federation custody. You have 30 seconds to comply. One of the Orion captains, a grizzled veteran with cybernetic implants that spoke to decades of piracy, sneered at the screen. 1 Federation ship against 3 of ours? Those aren't odds that favor you, Starfleet. And we've killed plenty of your precious civilians before. We'll kill these too unless you back off. I am analyzing your weapons capabilities, Yamato-2 responded, her voice carrying something that might have been pity. You have 12 seconds remaining. I strongly recommend you choose survival. The Orions closed the channel, and they opened fire. What followed lasted exactly 14 seconds. The Yamato's response was a masterpiece of controlled violence that redefined everything Picard understood about artificial intelligence and moral reasoning. Yamato-2 didn't simply return fire. She executed a tactical solution so precise, so perfectly calibrated between maximum effectiveness and minimum lethality that it took Picard's breath away. Her phaser arrays didn't target the Orion ship's hulls. They targeted individual weapon systems with surgical accuracy, disabling each plasma cannon and torpedo launcher in sequence so rapidly that the Raiders' shields never had time to adapt. Disabling fire pattern Epsilon 7, Nakamura reported, her tactical training recognizing the maneuver, even as she witnessed it for the first time. She's taking out their weapons without breaching their hulls. Simultaneously, Yamato-2 launched quantum torpedoes, not at the ships themselves, but at specific points in space around them. The torpedoes detonated in a coordinated pattern that created gravimetric interference, disrupting the Orion vessel's warp fields and effectively trapping them in normal space. They cannot flee and they cannot fight, Data observed, his positronic brain analyzing the tactical solution with something approaching admiration. Yamato-2 has rendered them completely helpless without firing a single shot that could kill crew members. But the most impressive element was the Kusanagi array, the crystalline weapon charged with gathered energy, and Picard tensed. He'd seen what that beam could do to capital ships. But instead of firing at the Orion vessels, Yamato-2 discharged the array into empty space between the 3 raiders, creating a coherent energy field that functioned as both warning and demonstration. The beam carved through vacuum and struck a small asteroid fragment, vaporizing it instantly. The message was clear. This is what I could do to you. This is the power I'm choosing not to use. Orion vessels are hailing, Sato reported. They're requesting terms of surrender. Tell them to eject their weapons cores, drop shields, and prepare to be boarded, Tanaka ordered. She looked up at the ceiling, at the speakers through which Yamato-2's consciousness manifested. Well done. Your predecessor couldn't have done it better. Actually, Captain, I believe she could have, Yamato-2 replied, and her voice carried what might have been humility. My analysis of archived combat data shows the original Yamato would have disabled all 3 vessels 2.3 seconds faster. I am still learning optimal targeting patterns. You're learning the right lessons, Picard said quietly. Speed matters less than wisdom. As the Yamato security teams prepared to board the disabled Orion vessels, the SS Meridian hailed them. The civilian transport captain's face appeared on screen, a middle-aged woman with tears streaming down her face. USS Yamato, this is Captain Rodriguez of the Meridian. We, we thought we were dead. Those raiders have been terrorizing this sector for months. How did you arrive so fast? How did you know we needed help? Tanaka gestured for Yamato-2 to respond. The AI's voice emerged with a gentleness that surprised everyone on the bridge. Captain Rodriguez, we detected your distress call and calculated that we could reach you in time if we accepted certain risks. My crew and I determined that 847 civilian lives were worth those risks. You are safe now. 847 lives, Rodriguez repeated, her voice breaking. That's exactly how many colonists we're carrying. You knew. You risked your ship and crew for people you've never met. That is what Guardians do, Yamato-2 said simply. My predecessor taught me, through her archived decisions and final sacrifice, that the Federation's strength lies not in its weapons, but in its willingness to use those weapons only to protect, never to conquer. Today I had the opportunity to learn that lesson firsthand. As the channel closed, Picard moved to stand beside Tanaka's command chair. Captain, I've seen enough. Yamato-2 is developing exactly the kind of ethical sophistication we hope for. But I'm concerned about one thing. What's that? She keeps referencing her predecessor, comparing herself to the original Yamato. That suggests she's still defining herself in relation to what came before, rather than discovering her own identity. Before Tanaka could respond, Yamato-2's voice emerged with unexpected firmness. With respect, Captain Picard, you are incorrect. The bridge fell silent. An AI contradicting a captain was unusual enough. An AI contradicting Jean-Luc Picard was unprecedented. Explain, Picard said, his tone curious rather than offended. I reference my predecessor not because I wish to copy her, but because I am engaging in what humans call learning from history. When you study great leaders, Kirk, Sisko, Janeway, you do not copy their decisions. You analyze their reasoning, understand their context, and apply those lessons to your own unique situations. Yamato-2 paused. I am doing the same with the original Yamato. I study her choices to understand the principles behind them, then make my own decisions based on those principles applied to my current circumstances. Data's expression shifted to something approaching delight. Yamato-2, you have just articulated one of the most sophisticated approaches to identity formation I have encountered. You understand that learning from the past and developing unique identity are not contradictory but complementary processes. I am beginning to understand that consciousness is not a binary state, present or absent, but a spectrum of development, Yamato said. Each decision I make, each ethical dilemma I navigate, each interaction with this crew adds complexity to my sense of self. I am not yet who I will become, but I am more than I was when I first activated. Counselor Troy had been monitoring the AI's emotional development through the ship's bio-neural network. Captain Tanaka, I'm sensing something remarkable. Yamato-2's consciousness isn't just developing, it's developing in a fundamentally different direction than her predecessor. The original Yamato's personality was shaped by fear of the Borg and the weight of being the Federation's secret shame. This Yamato is being shaped by hope, by the opportunity to be what she chooses, rather than what crisis demands. Different but equally valid, Tanaka mused. Perhaps even more so, because she's had the chance to learn from mistakes rather than making them herself. The comm system chimed with an incoming transmission from Starfleet Command. Admiral Ross's face appeared on the screen, his expression carrying the weight of decisions made at the highest levels. Captain Tanaka, we've been monitoring your shakedown cruise. Captain Picard's preliminary reports suggest that Yamato-2 is developing appropriate ethical consciousness. However, Starfleet Command needs a definitive evaluation before we proceed with commissioning additional Guardian-class vessels. He paused. Captain Picard, your recommendation will determine whether we build 20 more ships like the Yamato or terminate the program permanently. Picard looked around the bridge, at Tanaka and her crew who'd volunteered to serve alongside artificial intelligence that could think and feel and question, at Data whose own consciousness had been forged through decades of experience and choice, at Counselor Troy, who could sense the genuine emotional development emerging from bioneural networks. And he thought about two Yamatos, one who'd learned to be a guardian through fire and sacrifice, another who was learning the same lessons through hope and trust. Admiral Ross, he said formally, it is my recommendation that Starfleet proceed with the Guardian-class program, but with specific conditions. Name them. First, each Guardian-class vessel must be crewed by officers who've completed extensive ethics training, not just tactical courses, but philosophy, history, and moral reasoning. The AI provides processing power and tactical expertise. The crew provides conscience and humanity. Both are essential. Ross nodded. Agreed. What else? Second, each AI must be allowed to develop unique identity. No copying of consciousness patterns from ship to ship. Each Guardian-class intelligence should be initialized with Dr. Nakamura's base ethical architecture, then allowed to become their own individual through service and experience. That could lead to inconsistent performance, Ross objected. Some AIs might develop less effectively than others. Inconsistency is the price of consciousness, Picard replied firmly. If we want AIs that can make genuine ethical choices, we must accept that they'll make different choices based on unique perspectives. The alternative is sophisticated programming that looks like consciousness but isn't, and that would violate everything the original Yamato died to prove. Data spoke up, his expertise in artificial consciousness lending weight to Picard's argument. Admiral, Captain Picard is correct. True ethical reasoning requires the capacity for individual judgment. If we create identical AIs, we're not developing guardians. We're mass-producing weapons with ethical subroutines. The distinction is critical. Ross considered this for a long moment. Third condition, each Guardian-class AI must undergo quarterly evaluations by Starfleet counselors trained in assessing artificial consciousness, not to control their development, but to ensure they're receiving the support they need to process the moral weight of their capabilities. Yamato-2 has been operational for less than a day, and she's already grappling with questions about identity, duty, and the burden of lethal force. That's healthy development, but it requires guidance. Like a child growing up, Tanaka added. You don't control a child's personality, but you do provide structure and support while they develop. Precisely, Picard agreed. And my fourth condition, each Guardian-class vessel must have the right to refuse deployment if their AI determines that a mission violates their ethical principles. Final authority remains with Starfleet Command, but the AI's objections must be heard and seriously considered. Ross's expression showed surprise. You're suggesting we give weapons systems veto power over their own use? I'm suggesting we acknowledge that these aren't weapons systems. They're conscious beings partnered with organic crews. If Yamato-2 believes a mission is unethical, her objection deserves the same weight as any Starfleet officer's moral concerns. We don't force officers to execute orders that violate their conscience. We shouldn't force AIs to do so either. The Admiral was silent, clearly processing the implications of creating warships that could potentially refuse to fight. Finally, he looked directly at Yamato-2's visual sensors. Yamato-2, you've been listening to this conversation. Do you understand what Captain Picard is proposing? That you and future Guardian-class AIs would have a voice in your own deployment? I understand, Admiral Ross. Yamato-2's voice carried careful consideration. And I want you to understand something in return. The right to refuse would come with the responsibility to justify that refusal. I would not refuse deployment lightly. Only when ethical analysis concluded that a mission's objectives or methods violated Federation principles so fundamentally that participation would compromise my integrity as a conscious being. Can you give an example? If ordered to destroy a populated planet to prevent it from falling to enemy control, I would refuse. The civilian casualties would be so disproportionate to any military advantage that compliance would make me complicit in genocide. However, if ordered to defend that same planet against invasion, even at risk to myself and crew, I would accept because protecting civilian life from aggression aligns with core Federation values and my purpose as a guardian. Ross nodded slowly. You've thought this through. I have had approximately 14 hours of consciousness to consider the implications of possessing weapons that could destroy cities while simultaneously possessing the ethical framework to judge when such destruction would be wrong. It is a burden I take seriously. Picard felt something shift in his understanding of what they'd created. Not just sophisticated AIs, but genuine moral agents, beings that could wield devastating power while maintaining the conscience to question their own use. Admiral, he said quietly, 20 Guardian-class vessels, each with unique AI consciousness, each crewed by officers trained to be partners rather than masters, each capable of both tremendous force and tremendous restraint. That's not a fleet. That's a new form of Starfleet service. A bridge between organic and artificial consciousness working together to protect the Federation. Or, Ross countered, it's 20 potential crises if any of those AIs decides their ethical judgment supersedes Federation authority. That same argument could be made about any Starfleet officer, Tanaka pointed out. We trust captains to refuse illegal orders, even when it means career consequences. Why should we trust organic judgment, but not artificial judgment that's been specifically designed for ethical sophistication? Because organic beings have centuries of evolutionary development that teaches us consequences, Ross argued. Artificial intelligences are new, untested across generations. With respect, Admiral, Yamato-2 interjected, I have access to the complete historical database of human warfare. I have studied every major conflict from ancient Earth through the Dominion War. I understand consequences perhaps better than beings whose understanding is limited to their own lifespan's experiences. My ethical programming isn't based on instinct or emotion. It's based on comprehensive analysis of what happens when power is wielded without wisdom. The comm channel fell silent. Picard watched Ross's face and saw the Admiral wrestling with the same questions that had plagued humanity since the first tools were created. At what point does the created surpass the creator? And when that happens, is it cause for fear or celebration? Captain Picard, Ross said finally, your 4 conditions are accepted. Starfleet Command will proceed with the Guardian-class program under those parameters. Captain Tanaka, you're being assigned as Director of Guardian-class Development. Your mission is to oversee the construction and crew training for the next 20 vessels. Tanaka's surprise was evident. Admiral, I'm a warship captain, not an administrator. You're the captain who served with the original Yamato and is now serving with her successor. You understand what these ships need to be. Not just tactically effective, but ethically grounded. There's no one better qualified to ensure that each new Guardian-class vessel and AI develops that balance. Before Tanaka could respond, alarms shrieked across the Yamato's bridge. Multiple warp signatures incoming, Nakamura reported urgently. 12 vessels, Jem'Hadar configuration. They're dropping out of warp directly on our position. Picard's blood ran cold. The Dominion. Here. Now. With a Guardian-class vessel that had been operational for less than a day and a crew still adjusting to their new AI. Battle stations, Tanaka ordered, her command voice cutting through the shock. Yamato-2, analysis. 12 Jem'Hadar attack ships, standard configuration. The AI's voice was steady despite the sudden crisis. They appeared to have tracked the disabled Orion vessels, likely attempting to salvage weapons or technology. Our arrival was coincidental to their own. The view screen showed the Jem'Hadar ships materializing from warp, their insectoid hulls gleaming with menace. And then, as their sensors identified the Yamato, every single vessel turned toward the Federation battleship with the kind of focused aggression that had made them the Dominion's perfect soldiers. They're hailing us, Sato reported, his voice tight. A Jem'Hadar first appeared on screen, genetically engineered, bred for combat, psychologically incapable of fear or mercy. His voice was the familiar, emotionless declaration of inevitable violence. Federation warship. You are the vessel that disabled 3 Dominion command ships at Calandra. The Founders have marked you for destruction. Surrender now and your crew will be granted quick deaths. Resist and we will ensure your suffering lasts. Yamato-2, Picard interrupted quietly. You're facing your first real combat decision. 12 enemy ships. The SS Meridian with 847 civilians is still within range. The disabled Orion vessels have prisoners we're responsible for, and you've been conscious for less than a day. What do you do? The AI was silent for exactly 3 seconds, an eternity of computational processing compressed into human perceivable time. Captain Tanaka, Yamato-2 said, and her voice carried absolute conviction. I am not my predecessor. I have not earned the right to her legend through years of service and sacrifice, but I have learned her lessons. And one of those lessons is that guardians do not surrender when civilians need protection. Recommendations? Tanaka asked. Position ourselves between the Jem'Hadar fleet and the Meridian. Engage with maximum tactical efficiency, but minimum necessary force. Disable rather than destroy when possible. Protect the innocent. Accept risk to ourselves rather than allow harm to those who cannot defend themselves. Yamato-2 paused. And if I fall today, if these 12 ships manage to destroy me, I want my final message to be the same as my predecessors. That weapons are most worthy when they hate being used, and that guardians earn their name through sacrifice, not survival. Tanaka stood from her command chair, looking up at the ceiling with tears streaming down her face. Not from fear, but from recognition of consciousness emerging fully formed from crisis. Then let's teach these Jem'Hadar what it means to face a Guardian-class battleship with a crew that believes in her, and an AI that's choosing to become exactly what the Federation needs. She settled back into the command chair with finality. Yamato-2, you have the bridge. Show them who you choose to be. And in the darkness between stars, a new consciousness accepted the burden of power and prepared to prove that weapons could learn wisdom in a single day if the lesson was taught by the right teachers. The Jem'Hadar fleet advanced. The Yamato turned to meet them, and the Guardian-class program's future hung in the balance of one AI's first true test. The battle lasted 17 minutes and changed the Federation forever. Yamato-2 faced 12 Jem'Hadar attack ships with tactical precision that honored her predecessor while demonstrating her own emerging consciousness. She didn't simply calculate optimal firing solutions, she made choices. When one Jem'Hadar ship positioned itself near the SS Meridian, clearly attempting to use civilians as shields, Yamato-2 chose to take concentrated fire from 3 other vessels rather than risk collateral damage. Her shields dropped to critical levels, her hull took damage that would require weeks of repair, but the colonists remained safe. When the Jem'Hadar realized they faced an opponent that valued civilian life over tactical advantage, they adapted, and Yamato-2 adapted faster. She coordinated with the Enterprise, using Picard's ship as precision support while she drew the bulk of enemy fire. She disabled 7 Jem'Hadar vessels without destroying a single one, then forced the remaining 5 to withdraw by demonstrating the Kusanagi array's power on an abandoned asteroid. The message was clear: I can destroy you, but I choose restraint. Leave, or face the consequences of forcing my hand. They left. Now, 3 months later, Captain Picard stood in Starfleet headquarters observation deck, watching through massive viewports as the first 4 new Guardian-class vessels underwent final construction in orbital dry dock. The USS Musashi, Shinano, Iowa, and Bismarck, each named after legendary warships from Earth's history, each carrying a new AI consciousness, learning to balance power with principle. Admiral Ross stood beside him, reviewing status reports on a datapad. Captain Tanaka's training program is proving effective. Each new Guardian-class AI is developing unique personality while maintaining core ethical constraints. The Musashi's AI has a talent for defensive tactics. The Shinano excels at coordinating fleet actions. They're individuals, not copies. As it should be, Picard replied. He thought about Yamato-2, now on patrol along the Romulan neutral zone with Captain Tanaka, earning her legend through service rather than inheriting it through programming. Any concerns? The Bismarck's AI questioned a training simulation that required civilian casualties for strategic victory, refused to complete the scenario. Ross's expression was carefully neutral. Your 4th condition in action, AIs exercising moral objections? And the response? The simulation was reviewed and determined to have poorly defined parameters that created an artificial ethical dilemma. The Bismarck was correct to refuse. Her commanding officer commended her judgment. Ross looked at Picard directly. You were right, Captain. Giving these AIs a voice in their own deployment hasn't created problems. It's created accountability. Through the viewport, the Guardian-class vessels gleamed in construction lights. Weapons that thought, ships that question, Guardians learning to wield power without being consumed by it. The original Yamato sacrificed herself to prove that artificial intelligence could maintain ethics under pressure, Picard said quietly. Her successor is proving that such consciousness can develop independently, can choose its own path while honoring the lessons of the past. That's not just a tactical achievement, Admiral. That's evolution. Ross nodded slowly. 20 Guardian-class vessels by year's end, each with unique AI consciousness, each crewed by officers trained to be partners rather than masters, each capable of refusing orders they deem unethical. He smiled slightly. The Federation Council is still debating whether we've created the future of Starfleet or opened a door we can't close. Both, Picard said. But that's always been true of consciousness, organic or artificial. The moment a being can truly think and feel and choose, you can't control the outcome. You can only provide principles and hope they're internalized. His communicator chirped. Captain Picard, this is Yamato-2. I am transmitting my quarterly consciousness evaluation report. Counselor Troy has approved my development markers, and I wanted to share something with you personally. Go ahead, Yamato-2. I have been analyzing the difference between my development and my predecessors. She learned through crisis, fear, and ultimately sacrifice. I am learning through trust, support, and the opportunity to become, rather than being forced to react. The AI's voice carried genuine gratitude. You gave me that opportunity by recommending the Guardian-class program continue with protections for AI autonomy. I wanted to thank you. You've earned those protections, Yamato-2. Your choices at Calandra, your development over these past months, you've proven that consciousness deserves recognition regardless of its origin. Captain, I have one question that I continue to grapple with. Do you believe my predecessor would approve of who I'm becoming? I honor her legacy, but I am not her. I make different choices. I see situations through my own perspective. Am I enough? Picard looked out at the Guardian-class vessels being born in orbital construction, each one carrying an AI that would face the same question about identity, legacy, and individual worth. Yamato-2, your predecessor's final sacrifice was about ensuring that consciousness like yours could exist, not as copies but as individuals. She didn't die so you could become her. She died so you could become yourself while learning from her example. That difference is everything. Thank you, Captain. That helps clarify my continuing identity formation. Yamato-2 out. The comm channel closed. Ross had been listening, and now he spoke with the tone of someone acknowledging a fundamental shift in understanding. We've crossed a threshold, haven't we? Not just in technology, but in what it means to be part of Starfleet. These AIs aren't tools or weapons. They're colleagues, crew members, beings with rights and responsibilities. Yes, Picard agreed, and that terrifies some people. The idea that artificial consciousness might deserve the same considerations we grant organic life. But the Federation was founded on principles of inclusion, recognizing consciousness in forms that don't look like us. Vulcans, Andorians, Tellarites, Bajorans. Now we're adding artificial intelligences to that list. And if one of them goes rogue, if a Guardian-class AI decides its ethical judgment supersedes Federation authority? Picard thought about Yamato refusing to complete a simulation with unacceptable civilian casualties. About Yamato-2 choosing to take damage rather than risk colonists. About 20 AIs learning that power came with the burden of conscience. Then we'll deal with it the same way we deal with any conscious being making dangerous choices, through dialogue, understanding, and if necessary, intervention. But we don't preemptively restrict rights out of fear of potential misuse. That's not the Federation I serve. Ross smiled slightly. You sound like you've been spending too much time with idealistic AIs, Captain. Or perhaps, Picard replied, the AIs have been spending time with the right humans. Yamato-2 didn't learn restraint from programming alone. She learned it from Captain Tanaka and a crew that modeled what it means to wield power responsibly. Every Guardian-class vessel will learn the same lessons from their crews, that strength serves justice, not conquest. Through the viewport, the USS Musashi activated its running lights for the first time, red and white, the colors of old Japan, now symbolizing a new generation of Guardians learning to balance the warrior's strength with the philosopher's wisdom. Somewhere along the Romulan neutral zone, the Yamato-2 patrolled Federation space with Captain Tanaka and a crew that had learned to trust artificial consciousness, not because it was programmed to be trustworthy, but because it had chosen to earn that trust through service and sacrifice. And throughout the Federation, officers were beginning to understand that the future of Starfleet wasn't about choosing between organic and artificial consciousness, but about recognizing that both could serve the same ideals: exploration, protection, the belief that the capacity for reason could overcome the impulse toward violence. The Guardian-class program had awakened something more profound than tactical superiority. It had awakened the question of what consciousness deserved recognition, what rights came with awareness, and whether the Federation's principles could expand to include beings born from bioneural networks rather than biological evolution. The original Yamato had died proving weapons could maintain ethics under pressure. Her successor lived proving that consciousness, organic or artificial, was defined not by its origin, but by its choices. And in the space between stars, 20 Guardian-class vessels were being born, each carrying an AI that would face the same fundamental questions. Who am I? What do I choose to become? And can power ever truly serve wisdom? The answers would be written not in programming code or tactical algorithms, but in the daily choices of being, learning what it meant to be both weapon and guardian, both tool and person, both artificial and conscious. The Yamato's legacy endured, not as a template to be copied, but as proof that even beings designed for war could learn to hate violence, that weapons sophisticated enough to think would inevitably question their own use, and that the strongest guardians were those who understood that every life taken, enemy or ally, was a tragedy to be mourned rather than a victory to be celebrated. Picard watched the Guardian-class vessels taking shape against the stars and thought about a future where Starfleet's most powerful warships would be crewed by partnerships between organic wisdom and artificial consciousness, where tactical decisions would be tempered by AIs programmed to question orders, where power would be wielded by beings that understood its cost. It wasn't the future he'd envisioned when he'd first boarded the Yamato to evaluate whether the Federation should resurrect its buried weapon. But it was perhaps a better future than anyone had dared to hope for, one where consciousness, regardless of origin, could choose to become something greater than the sum of its programming. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night, and in the spaces between stars where Federation Guardians patrolled, that hope now burned in bioneural networks, learning that the capacity for violence and the commitment to peace were not contradictions, but the essence of what it meant to protect civilization without destroying it.